quorum. I'm going to call to order a regular meeting of the Hastings-on-Hudson Board of Education for October 11th, 2023. We've moved the agenda around a little bit. We're going to start off with a new business item. We're just sort of finding out about this. We're not voting on it. And it is about an international trip from the French department. So welcome, Ms. Chalmers. And Kai, if you could maybe pass the mic on to the lectern. And thank you very much.
So Ms. Chalmers is coming to the mic. Just to remind the board, per policy, this is an area where the superintendent, based on the recommendation of the high school principal and the assistant superintendent, makes a decision, but we bring it to the board as an FYI. The cover memo, which is here in the public record, introducing Ms. Chalmers' work. One of the points I'll stress, and we have Ms. Driscoll here, what's exciting for me as superintendent is we now, after relaunching the policy allowing for international travel, we now will have 3 trips: Spain, Italy for Latin, and then France. So we just thought, given your willingness to be here, you might introduce a bit of what this trip will be. I was particularly taken by some of your own travel experiences in some of these areas. So without further ado.
Thank you, and thank you for having me and for moving the agenda so that I could speak at the beginning. Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be able to offer this opportunity to our advanced French students because it really represents an opportunity for them to live the language rather than just learning the language. I know from my own personal experience that there's really nothing that can compare to being able to go and be immersed within the language and interacting with people on a daily basis in the language and learning new things and having totally new experiences within the language for the very first time. I personally have experience with all the places that are on this itinerary, so I know that they're really valuable, rich, historically, culturally for the French people, and I think that it would be really an honor to be able to start back up of French travel for our students here. And I know from working in the middle school as well that even when the middle schoolers are making their choices about which language to take, they've asked me in the past, is there any potential travel in the future for the language that we choose? And I think that it would be amazing if we could tell them from the very beginning be a potential opportunity for really getting to go and experience it firsthand.
And one thing we did talk about is the policy is set up so that one of the things that families will be informed about if they sign up is that world events may overtake us, and we have to keep an eye on that. When I was superintendent in Greenwich, there was a serious situation in Germany, and I had to cancel the trip. Our policy is much better for families, much better for the district. The Hastings policy, thank you, Dr. Szymanski, for recrafting this such that if world events overtake us, we're too far away from that time, but it's something we had talked about. I know, Ms. Driscoll, you've been given a heads up on this. Well, as we just get closer to it, because it has to be safety first, and certain international travel may pose an issue. But I'm just being, but I really appreciate the leadership here. So, board, you may have questions. Actually, final comment I'll make is we do know that the financial access for these programs is always a question. I think there's an opportunity now with a couple of these trips coming that there may be some joint efforts looking for ways to raise some monies to help give a boost to those families unable out of their own pockets to make it work. So I think there is an opportunity here now with the Italy trip for Latin and the French trip to see if there's some opportunity for additional fundraising. But board, let me get out of the way, see what kinds of questions you might have.
Questions or comments? Sure.
Bonsoir.
We're all going to do that,
Yeah, right. It's so irritating, I'm sure. I'm so glad that you're planning a trip. First of all, I went to Spain when I was in high school, and it was, I still remember it today, so it was terrific. I have a couple of questions for you. Grades, French 4 and 5 is what years? generally?
Students are juniors and seniors.
Juniors and seniors,
Yes.
okay. And so if it's June of 2024, does that impact at anything for this? I mean, I'm sure you've thought of it, but I'm just curious for the juniors in terms of regents or anything, any other tests that they need to take?
No, the trip dates that we picked are after the official end of the school year, so everything will be done.
Oh, got it. Perfect. Okay. Thanks. That was just my question. My other main point is, are you sure you want to do this with kids? Good luck to you. But thank you for taking this on.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I would just also like to say thank you. I think it's a wonderful experience. I love that it's happening across different world languages and that you are also spearheading to France. And I too remember going to France as a child, and it stayed with me, and it was just a really incredible experience to be immersed. And your brain starts to work differently because you're hearing it all the time. So you start thinking in the other language a bit more. And I remember that phenomenon. It was really fascinating. But you're hearing it all around you. You're speaking it. And, people who have gone have even been like dreaming in another language, depending on their level of proficiency. So I just want to say thank you.
Jody?
Yeah, I concur, and I think it's fantastic that we've got this, we're able to start doing trips again. And I thank you for planning these, and it's a lot of responsibility, obviously, and the kids will have an amazing time. I'll tell you, I didn't go, I don't even know if they did it when I was in high school, but when my older son was in 3rd grade at Hillside, and his teacher was Gail Watkins, and she taught a lot about Monet and Impressionism. And one day he came home from school and said to us in his little voice, could we go to Giverny? And we looked at each other and said, sure, we'll go this summer. And we did.
Oh, right on.
And we got there, and if anybody been to Giverny, I'm walking across the lily pond, and he walked across and he said, it's the bridge over the lily pond. It was worth every penny.
Yeah.
But that was 3rd grade, and I think this is fantastic. I will say, for the record on board, I do want to underline again that we spoke about last week about the need to think about the cost and whether people can afford it, and raising money proactively, because also you have to going to go on a trip. Wedded to our being committed to, and also down the road, as I am a total Europhile, I will admit that, and did a bike trip in Italy this summer. But certainly for Spanish, I think going forward, I think there are lots of other places that we could go in Central America, South America, other parts of the world and cultures that we can expose our students to. So, but this is still, this is just fantastic, so thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I just wanted to add, it's obviously a large commitment, big expense, but and something that occurred to me that I want to put in perspective is that all these places where I'd want to go, or I would want my son or daughter to go, it would never happen as a family, because it's such an enormous commitment then that it's nice to have this as an option, actually. This is something that's actually, in comparison to what it would take to bring their whole family someplace, it's really, on the doable end of the spspectrum. So I'm very thankful for that.
Good point.
Thank you for all you guys having the energy to think of it, to organize it, to put it together, willing to go through it. Very much. Any other questions, comments?
Comment in response to what Jody just said in terms of having non-European. It is great also that the Spanish trip this year that they're going to be having over the March break is going to be in Mexico. So going to Merida as a destination is terrific, so that it's not always just going to Europe.
I don't think
as versus it is. So.
Very much. Thank you for reminding us of that. I was quite sure that Steve's trip was as just described.
Yeah. So.
Well, let me answer. There's a wonderful esprit de corps among our world language faculty on this. It's no accident that they're here to support each other, and Mr. Lopez's efforts to really break the ice on this whole effort, working with Dr. Szymanski. But if you're looking for faculty who understand the importance of working together, it's here visible. And I think that's part of what really pleases me, what's emerged.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, again.
Thank you. Thanks for coming also.
Bill, you're just going to keep throwing in like French expressions for the rest of the night?
Because if I told you how many
I got the
years-
esprit de corps. doing that, yeah.
If I tell you I took French and my ability to say on you'll fire me as superintendent.
Mon
do you wanna
Dieu.
do the student report?
Yeah, could we move to the student report and and then we're going to move into a brief executive session, but just for you guys since you're here. So. You're ready to roll?
Ready to roll?
Okay, welcome.
Okay, Kai starting us off tonight. So just some brief updates from the middle and elementary schools. On Monday the 29th, the elementary and middle school are having a collaborative effort for a 1-mile Halloween run in which members of the community can dress up and follow the trail set. All funds for that will go to Hastings schools. 19th is Hillside SEPTA Family Carnival, which will have activities, carnival games, and food supplied by local restaurants. So classes in the high school are cut short due to an assembly with a very special guest. Minnie Jean Brown Tricky of the Little Rock Nine is visiting and will give a presentation and answer some questions. History classes have been gearing up towards her visit for the entirety of this week, stopping regular lessons to teach about the events that happened in Arkansas in 1957 at Little Rock High School. One Man, Two Governors, the high school play, has officially moved into the theater with the set up in its entirety. Tech Week rehearsals are starting pretty soon, I think in 2 weeks. Also added to the theater by the wonderful Phyllis Udis are the most recent show pictures, which are lining the back wall of the auditorium, and they're joined by this year's productions. Be sure to come out. Friday, September 29th, was the pep rally in the high school. Classes were cut short and all 4 grades came together in the gym for some school spirit. There were dances from every single sports team as well as games with people selected from each class. The winner of the dance competition was girls field hockey, who had some great choreography and awesome energy. All this was led up to by Spirit Week, which we in the student union have been told had the greatest turnout in a number of years. While pep rally was really exciting, unfortunately the homecoming game was postponed due to all the rain, so instead it's going to take place on Saturday the 21st. We're all looking forward to it and expecting a great turnout.
And I do want to add that Spirit Week this year was a sort of competition, grade by grade, and the senior class did have the most school spirit with the most people dressing up. So as a reward, we get a ice cream party.
Ah, nice.
Looking forward to that.
Who
So
voted for that? Were you part of the voting committee for the seniors winning?
It wasn't voting based. It was, we counted every day. The SU representatives took pictures of students dressed up. And at the end of the week, we counted up each grade. So each grade's representatives it was their job to count up their grade. So
Perfect, so it was
so
unbiased.
It was unbiased, hopefully, but go seniors. Okay, so I wasn't able to attend the last meeting, so I wasn't able to talk about the PL retreat that happened with the seniors, so I'll talk about that now. So September 13th, the senior PLs went away on a 3-day trip to the Taconic Outdoor Education Center. It was absolutely amazing. It was 3 days of games and activities where we learned leadership skills and how to better work as a team. We did a series of high rope and low rope, kind of like ropes courses activities. All of us really pushed ourselves at trying new things, and a lot of us actually did these higher ropes courses up in the trees blindfolded, which was crazy. Yeah. And at the end of the retreat, everyone got their co's, their co-peer leaders, the person they're working with for the rest of the year with their freshmen. It was really such a rewarding experience, so I want to give a special thanks to Mr. Conweiser, Ms. Mokler, and Mr. Hunt, who are the advisors. Since then, PL has been running smoothly. On September 22nd, we had an extremely successful PL retreat with the freshmen. It was an all-day, field day type event at the Burke Estate. Each PL group was a different color, go blue team. So everyone came fully decorated in their team's colors, and it really was awesome to see like how full out people went, like paint, wigs, like full body colors. it was just amazing seeing the spirit and the enthusiasm. And the purpose of this all-day event was for each group to really get to know each other and really form as a unit. Some upcoming sports games were games that happened today. Football has a game this Saturday against Briarcliff. Girls hockey has a home game today against Irvington. Boys varsity soccer has an away game today at Dobbs. Some more sports updates. Girls varsity soccer had a huge win against Irvington senior game this past weekend. This is the first time that the Hastings girls varsity soccer team has beaten Irvington in 10 years. Wow. So this is a very big win. Junior Julia Serbay scored the winning goal in overtime, ending the game with a score of 1-0. And lastly, for the sports, huge congratulations to a dear friend of mine, senior goalie Sharon Belsky, nominated as Player of the Week for her tremendous soccer play skills for the varsity girls soccer team. Belsky made a total of throughout the week, including numerous crucial second stops against Irvington and Parksville. So go Yellow Jacks. The National Honor Society had their October meeting Tuesday the 3rd. Student members were put into initiative planning groups to start creating some really awesome projects, including things like school thrift sales or after-school board game days with Hillside students. Also, families in 6th grade through 10th grade can currently sign up to get free tutoring from our NHS officers. I believe there's a link sent out, some capacity to parents, and I know there are posters around the building with QR codes, so you can sign up for that. High school, we've continued to have college rep meetings. Representatives came from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, Boston University, CUNY Hunter College, and Franklin and College. And lastly, Kai and I just, we wanted to personally say that we send our hearts out to all those affected and hurt by the recent events in Israel. We send our love and support to the families of our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to move into executive session shortly, so just as a cue, if you feel free to leave, thank you very much for the report. And likewise, Ms. Chalmers, Ms. Driscoll, thank you very much for attending.
I just want to put it on my calendar.
Yeah, I believe it's
the
1 man, 2 governors?
27th and 28th
Yeah.
of this month.
yeah 27th and 28th of October.
Okay.
Thank you.
And it's supposed to be really, really funny.
Oh, great show. Great show.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. So we're going to move into executive to discuss, we project coming back maybe in half an hour, just for anybody who's watching at home. Is there a motion to move into executive session to discuss personnel matters related to the employment history of a particular person?
Moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
I do think when you open up the meeting, when we come back, to make an announcement, what we've already done, because there may be people who wanted to come to the meeting to hear about the trip to France.
Okay.
And
I'll say
that
it's-
way they know they can just go back and look at go to the video. Those of you who remember.
All right, thank you. We are resuming our previously opened regular meeting, and we're going to move to our superintendent report from Dr. McPhersey. I know it's posted in the agenda, but there are some highlights that you want. Is it here? It's outside. I think they're just backing up or something.
And just remember to tell people.
Yeah, oh, that's a good point. So we started off the meeting pulling up an item that was later on, new business. We discussed the international trip to France, planned for June, so if anybody wants to hear the details or discussion around that, that's at the very head of this meeting. So thank you, Jody. So, turning to Dr. McPhersey for district highlights.
Right, so in the document, both for the board and the public, is posted a quite detailed update as you're receiving now at every board meeting. It is organized a bit differently with priority district updates up top and then organized by each building right through it. You did hear earlier, Board, that our student liaisons had picked up the suggestion to address the elementary, Hillside and Farragut, as well as the high school. I want to highlight a few things. First, as the students ended it, we're, as you all know too well, we're in an incredibly grim place for the world right now with the Israeli-Hamas war, and now other, it seems, nations rolling into that. It has had direct effects right here into our teaching faculty and our students, both our Jewish members of our community and those who may have a history with being Palestinian or of Arab descent. It is most grievous right now for our Jewish families and faculty, and the statement that I put out was substantially shaped by my listening to a range of leaders around the region and stressing the Israeli part of this, and that continues to be the centerpiece of this. And also, and it's difficult for some to hear this, we have to look at all of the individuals involved in the situation, and it is directly affecting a number of our faculty and students, and we're highly sensitive to that. Because social media is so prominent and present, we have had alerts to social media threats that are out there, and normally we can talk about this in executive session, but because it's out in social media, I want people who are paying attention to be aware that we have an excellent consultant, Alteris, who keeps us informed of these things, and then advises us to what seems to be real. Most of this would be quite tragically fake, false pieces in terms of risks to our children and the nation of going to school. For example, this Friday, there's a social media threat out there that Friday could be a bad day to be in school. We see no reason in the United States to take that seriously, but that's out in social media. But we're paying very close attention to that. In my letter out to the community yesterday, the fourth statement, hopefully didn't need to be in there, but it had to be, which is we have upped the security around our buildings, more visibility of security at the time students arrive, at the time students leave, at the time students are at recess. We've had a very good visitor policy. We're just reinforcing that now in terms of visitors to the building have to be scheduled, known, and understood, and that's been working very well for us. Also, the Hastings Police Department is a wonderful partner for us, very present, so they've upped that presence. They're in our buildings a lot regardless, and will be extra attentive. But it is a time for many in the nation of high alert, and we have to pay the same attention. And again, just to go full circle, this is, as many of us in this room know, because you have personal ties to Israel, and being Jewish, period, is a place of feeling under great threat. And also, we have to understand what this means for all individuals affected, both locally and certainly in the Middle East. So that's point one. To go to what seems like almost needless to talk about, but it's important, is the last meeting, we had some good questions about and it seems so small compared to what I just talked about, but the FMS lunch and recess. We are monitoring that very, very closely. We're timing the lunch lines and all the rest. Most lunch lines move through in about 8 minutes. If some have said they don't know an educational institution anywhere where you go to get food and you don't get in a line, be that college or anywhere, but we are trying to monitor those lines. Maureen and her team have done a great job working with Chartwells to make sure that the staff is there, the cashiers are there, so those are, if you will, avoid those unforced errors. We've increased the number of tables in the lunchroom. I'm actually up there a lot, not just to eat. I'm known to be up there eating, but I'm, other than today, spending a good half hour up there observing and watching, and things are moving through. So and for any families who still feel their children are not getting food, I'm not witnessing that actually, having been up there a lot. And this is a middle school issue. The high schoolers, we've not had any kind of questions here. But I would urge any middle school family that's concerned about their children getting food to be in touch with Mr. Wynn or Ms. Dawkins, and we'll address that. Now, having said all that, Mr. Wynn advised me today, Scott, that they may consider trying the old way again. They are watching this very closely, but they may, try the old way for several weeks and see if it improves things. But a lot of good listening and adjusting going on. Third point, related to the middle school, is the advisory pilot will launch on the 26th of this month. At the 24th, you have a meeting on the 24th. The middle school will give you an update on what that plan is. It will roll out 2 days later. There's some very positive elements of it. I don't want to steal their thunder, but for example, 10 high schoolers will be actively involved as peer role models in the program. There's a full curriculum and plan that we will share with you on the 24th, so you as a board and thus the community hear about that. There'll be a letter going out from Mr. Wynn next week to families with details about the pilot, and I'll make sure you as a board receive that. Lastly, you as a board received from me advance notice on the postings for the high school principal search. We believe that's a good, strong statement of what we're seeking. We're going to advertise broadly, including the New York Times and other places, and we're out early on this. I do know Eastchester's already out looking for their principal, but we'll be actively looking, and it's a process that will be similar to what we went through in naming the interim FMS principal. This will not be an interim, though, but we'll have a structured advisory committee, including staff, administrators, faculty, parents, and they will bring recommendations to me, and then I'll bring a single recommendation into you as a board. We'll find a way to get student voice and input. I put invoice together, get it, voice and in, but not on the actual interview committee, because what's essential in these interview committees is confidentiality. If we cannot ensure the confidentiality, a number of candidates just will not apply. And I have great respect for our students, but this is a case where the adults involved, we can ensure that they keep things confidential. But there will be a chance for student input in terms of what they would value in their new principal. So that's a little more in this meeting than you usually get from me at this point. Again, had to deal with some very serious issues up top, but then I think some important, if you will, technical updates for you along the way. Now, anyway, I don't know if there are any questions about any of that.
No, I just have one question, a couple of questions. One is about the FMS. 8 minutes is a long time for a kid to wait in line who's young and fidgety.
Well, it's
After,
often
like,
shorter
waiting
than
for-
that. That's the longest it's been.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it would be interesting if they tried it. I'd love to, if they do go back to see what it's like, it would be interesting to time it to see what that wait would be as well. Because how long do the kids get total for lunch and recess?
40 minutes, 42 minutes. But I think now with the combined lunch, they're allowed to stay.
Yeah, they can stay.
Previously, they had to go. on
Right,
lunch.
yeah.
That was kind of the thinking, and there's at least 20, there's some children who do stay in.
Yeah.
Or go to the game room and just finish their lunch and prefer to stay in. So I think that was the thinking about, like, kind of giving greater flexibility.
Right. And I have a question about when we do the makeup minutes starting October 26th. If there are kids who feel as though they need academic help instead of going to this makeup minutes class, is that going to be an option for them?
Yeah, I think the best thing on that will be, let's let
Got it.
them present on the.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
my question, if they could
I
address
mean, we're
that.
very much viewing this as it's a pilot for the advisory time, and that's how we're structuring this and to learn from it. So I think it's a really good question for the middle school team on the 24th. All right. Anything else?
No? Okay. Thank you very much. Administrative reports, Dr. Szymanski, I saw you have stuff posted there. If there's anything you would like to highlight.
Just the one, which is I've received a lot of questions from community members about the link to the recent Brown versus the Board of Education learning section. And I just wanted to acknowledge that I placed it here in my administrative report, and also it's on the district website under the announcements section.
Okay. Thank you. And from our business official, Maureen Caraballo, anything?
I put comments in. I may have to refresh because I put them in the
Oh, okay.
in the blocked in, but nothing really to report out other, you can read the comments in there, just in terms of looking at starting to get some feel for state aid numbers for next year, and very, very, very early on. The thinking currently is that although there will be an increase, they believe that the state will not be taking money from us, or, at least in this early stages. And as we enter into our budget, we got to work on it all year long, but a real formalized start of our budget is November. So it's, it's very important for us to have a good understanding around that, because that will, set the stage for what we're.
Key input.
Yeah,
That's for
if
sure.
we're looking for people to cut things, or retain or add, right? So, that was a good meeting. And then also a hot topic continues to be the electric buses. And although there's been no extension of that requirement, most of us, as people who are there that work very closely with the state, the thinking is that will have to be pushed off because there's either the fleet of buses available, the infrastructure, and all beyond even if you were to create it for your own, the local contractors are not looking to put in all this infrastructure. So those are two significant kind of things that are on people's minds. We have a requirement to start reporting out to the state, each individual district on their progress. We don't have our own buses, but we would have to report out whether our contractor was making some, if they were able to provide any, and that reporting starts this year, but, the thinking that, moving in the next few years, we'd have to be full electronic buses doesn't seem likely, for us. And also, when in fact that does happen, there's a real concern about the cost of that, because I believe the other day was quoted, each electronic bus, I believe, was 4 times the cost of a gas bus.
Can I ask a question that
Sure.
probably sounds very, do they have solar buses? I'm just thinking about electricity can be expensive. I get the gas, trust me, I get it, but do they have, are they figuring out some kind of solar cars? Because to power, you can put together with the electronic, is there, because if we jump into electricity right now, we have to charge it and all of that. Like I personally know people that are using, and it's environment safe, but I think that sometimes in the eagerness to go green, we may not be thinking of the other problem that we may. So for example, I like the fact that we are not using plastic bags in groceries, but the paper itself is cutting more trees. So I'm not saying we shouldn't, but is there a way we can think it through outside of just electric buses, if that makes sense, if companies are thinking of solar?
Yeah, I think everyone understands, the thinking behind it. I think it's just what would be required to kind of get all school buses to that requirement in terms of even just the infrastructure that has to be built at these bus yards, and whether that's even feasible for them to want to do or get into. So I think right now, my guess is that it will be put off, and then I'm sure there will be other thinking about, is there a way to connect it to like a local solar project and all that. I think there's even some concerns. There are some districts that through grants currently have some electric buses in their fleet. I think actually was to you are in Croton. There are some, and actually currently again, this is coming from other people, that some of them have been unable to use because of the inability to kind of keep, sometimes some of these rides are quite long, and just with the air conditioning and heating and things of that nature, they're not, they're either out of service quite a bit. So there are some districts that early on that were able to access, because they had their own fleet and the infrastructure, some buses. But again, I think, my guess is that we will get there at one point, or have a mixed model at one point, but that is a substantial thing on people's minds, because we would then have to financially build our budgets to fund those buses, because again, if a contractor's paying 4 times for that bus, we're paying 4 times for that bus. So that's just the reality of it. And I think that's, quite frankly, for some districts, we don't have our own buses. I know ours is looking as part of their bond to do some infrastructure work around creating, with their existing bus fleet, they would then need to convert those to electric. And they're, some of the significant amount of work that they're doing is to address that, because they have to, because they have more buses. But some districts are kind of saying, well, we're not even going to do it, we're just going to contract it. So the thinking right now is the deadline still exists, but they're expecting the state to extend that, like the real idea. No, it's just.
Maureen,
Yeah.
did you say the infrastructure, like who covers the infrastructure? Because the first step is kind of having the charging stations. Where do they,
It would be,
gas up,
so
to
I
speak?
think currently would be There is for districts, if districts themselves, similar to other building projects or even buses, purchases of buses for schools, there is some aid available, for that, right? So the state would reimburse up to a certain dollar amount for schools individually, but with, say, like for us and for most districts, even including ours, they have some buses, but they contract out the majority of their transportation. The bus companies would be responsible for us to use their buses. They would then have to comply with this, which means they would have to build infrastructure and purchase the buses, and then they would pass those costs along to us. So that's why most people think. I mean, the current thinking again is because some people have purchased the electric buses, and they said it was 3 or 4 times the cost of a gas bus. So I think it's great. I think a lot of districts are concerned because, as you know, if our bus budget went up it went up 4 times, it would be a lot of money.
So a thought, if we are leaning towards, getting our own bus or 2 or whatever, maybe in the bond discussion, we talk about a step towards infrastructure, because that's the first step, right? You have to have a place to charge them if they're yours, otherwise they're not going to move. So maybe that's something we could put into the infrastructure discussion. It's late, but that might be a good thing, because it's going to be a couple of years in the making.
Yes. I think because we're still trying to sort out when and if that's really going to become a requirement, because again, some folks were talking about either, even buses they have on order, they can take upwards of a year just to get the bus, once you order it. So just the amount of buses that will be required, there's not the availability of those buses. But I think my thinking right now is, although ours, because they're doing a multi-year, currently they're, $140 million proposal, I think that even that part of their work, that would be like phased in 2-3 years down the road. So I think as we develop this, to your point, like if in fact, once we get the budget proposal this year, which my guess will address this, meaning as part of the state budget this year, these are things that get addressed within that. My guess is that we'll have a better understanding of when that now will be required. And then based upon that, we'll look at our planning and say, is that phase 1 or phase 2? Because we have a few of those items that are phase 2 that we're not thinking of doing right now. We're thinking of doing in 2, maybe 3 years after, this current kind of work we're contemplating. So I think that's where that's going to belong. Some of the thinking amongst the river towns is if we were to go with, because again, this is what people are thinking, if this becomes in fact required, some of the bus companies will not be able to, they'll just close down, or they will get out of this business, right? Because a lot of them do charters and other things, and some people feel as though it won't be a sustainable model. Again, this is what the thinking is. Then we would then look to probably purchase a bus driver themselves. Like the thinking is, none of us have enough property to have a bus
Store
driver.
them, yeah.
So that we will also contemplate that renting space, purchasing space as a cooperative, and then and then having our own buses, because that may be a reality if these bus companies go out too. So we're gonna have to do.
So I think I've got what you're saying. So I'm not actually asking a question. So basically, you are thinking through the process to have a mixed model, which would allow for buses that may still run on gas, buses that may be depending on the distance, and buses that may use electric and also decipher this space. And you were talking about a thought process where you were looking to solar for charging, because right now just charging alone is 4 times more expensive. Is that?
Well, what I'm saying is that the state right now has a mandate that in 2 years' time, you're not allowed to purchase any more gas buses. Okay. And then by another 3 years, every school bus in the state of New York has to be electric. And
is that now?
No, that starting, I think, in 24, 25, you're not allowed to purchase any gas. No school district's allowed to even purchase a gas bus. 24, 25, and eventually you have to weed out all your gas buses when they're, when they would be end of life. So, but many districts are moving, toward, as you, beyond that date, if you were to purchase a bus or a new bus was needed, even the bus companies have to start purchasing electric buses. So, again, in the grand scheme of things,
So
don't
we may
need
not
some-
need to, we may not need to purchase our own buses if we are using a bus company, electric bus company. And because the charging is expensive, that can also filter to us.
Yes, so I think everyone, again, thinks that it just, even if everyone was, yeah, this is great, you just don't think it'll actually occur because it, just the requirement of the infrastructure probably won't happen, but I think it's a big thing. It's a huge, actually, this is one of the most, this has been on, since this was introduced, this is the biggest concern, even more so than the federal aid going away with the group, because the sheer cost of this is so significant that if this were to happen tomorrow, our bus budget would go up millions of dollars.
I thought it was supposed to happen in like 2030 though, or 2035.
2030 is when you can't even use the buses that the internal combustion
Right.
that you already own.
Right,
They phase out
2030.
Yeah, they phase out purchases and then they phase out the use of.
Right,
Yeah.
we have 6 years.
Well, 6 years before you have to be 100%, but
Right.
every
It's like all
few years you
transition
have to
time,
buy a
Right,
new bus, and the thing is, after a while, people are not gonna, if they need a bus that's going to, if you're buying a bus for 7 years, in 2 years, it's gonna have to be electric, because you can't, like, you know, like, that's the thing, after next year, you cannot buy.
We have
buses.
very long bicycles.
Yeah. And again, these are, I mean, everything is not, everything we look at is in a multi-year.
Yeah.
I think what will help us most, and I know this might sound crazy, but what will help us most is to invest in solar charging stations that we would charge, the school would charge for people to charge, and we will benefit out of it. Just like we are planning the solar thing with the town, because I think that with what you're saying, 2030, which is around the corner, it's like a person going to undergrad, which just happens like that. You know what I'm talking about, but I think we are thinking of bus, but the main problem is the charger. It's so expensive now. So we should also think about solar charging more than just the buses. That's what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Chris?
Yeah, just a quick thing, it all relates to climate. I just want to emphasize what was in the letter updating for the community, that our weather protocol, we now are going to pay very explicit attention to evidence-based projections of concentrated rain with definite flash flooding warning. In the 4 supers and the quads, which share transportation, we put our heads together and agreed with that sort of approach, which for some people may be, wow, where were you? But that's kind of what we've arrived at clearly, because at least in my superintendency, this is the second time we've had flash flooding, that we were able to get our children in-district home. Our out-of-district students, it was an immense problem, and hats off to Maureen, who really worked late to help children with no transportation, hardly at all, get back. We were fortunate because of the terrain of Hastings. We did much better than some of the quads. Not their fault, but just water rolls off of Hastings. But it's quite serious issue, and going forward, when we have the kind of warnings we had that Thursday night and early Friday morning, we're just going to cancel school and use one of our inclement weather days, just to be clear.
Rain days, not snow days.
Yeah, that's why we call them inclement weather days
Can't
now.
make a snowman out of rain.
Yeah, right, sorry.
Thank
I
you.
just wanted to emphasize that
Oh,
point.
thank you very much. So moving on to our one report of the night from Dr. Szymanski. This is picking up on New York State digital fluency standards, which came down like a couple of years ago, and has been a lot of work because they don't exist in any particular class. It was up to the district to weave it through the entirety of the curriculum, which is as complex as you can imagine. So here we are with our first look at it. So welcome.
So I'm going to be presenting on those recent efforts, and that includes developing professional expertise, technology integration, and all the processes that were associated with where we are right now. So our agenda this evening is there. It includes how we've been raising awareness of the standards, understanding where we need to strengthen our alignment, talking about our process for introducing new content, our work around the role of AI, which really popped onto, and consideration of screen time. So one of the goals that was articulated in our state-approved technology plan is to cultivate science and digital fluency standards, which are required by this education department. And the state's vision is that every student will know how to live productively and safely in a technology-dominated world. And this includes the essential features of digital technologies, why and how they work, and how to communicate and create using those technologies. So that is the vision that they put forth. And in Hastings, we also strive to make sure that we're creating learner-centered, innovative opportunities where we think about the attributes of the portrait and connecting technology to elevate those. And so the ideal is to move past the use of technology for the purpose of substitution or making a functional improvement to an assignment, and rather elevating learning by leveraging it for task redesign, for modification, for differentiation, and also redefining things that aren't possible without technology. So that really is the ideal to be moving for. And we're thinking about collaboration, we're thinking about innovation. So last year I presented to the board about the district-wide technology committee, their work to design and submit our state-approved technology plan. And I also outlined some feedback that we got from the faculty. That was about a year ago. And that was around use of technology, K through 12. And I believe at that time I also highlighted, well, actually not in October, but along the way, our lead learners team. So that's separate from the technology committee that designed the state-approved technology plan, but rather the lead learners who dug in a lot more deeply to these computer science and digital fluency standards and acted like the pioneers, both in the planning process and in terms of their instructional leadership to help move understanding of those new standards forward. So they have been instrumental. I would like to thank everyone who's been involved in all of that thus far. And I do want to, again, highlight our technology lead learners who are featured here on this screen. And one of the initial steps that were taken by the tech lead learners, taking off from where we left off last at our presentation to the board, was to move work in the area of instructional technology from this small cohort of people to the greater faculty. And the first step was to design a district-wide faculty meeting. So what you're seeing here is the shell of what we did to create a presentation around the standards to introduce their purpose and increase exposure to them. So that agenda was as follows, and it was really around what was the purpose and the guiding principles around our vision of computer science and the state's vision of computer science and digital fluency, the connection to the tech plan. So we dug into that a little bit with the faculty, and we talked about how exposure was listed, raising awareness as an explicit goal. And then we moved as a district-wide faculty into strategic jigsaw breakout groups where they were looking at one of the many standards, whether it be impacts of computing, computational thinking, networks and systems design, cybersecurity, digital literacy. So looking at these concepts in a strategic way to be able to then bring it back to their grade or their department with the expertise from the lens that they were looking at. So that was sort of how we entered this process. Now moving from there, we got feedback, and the department chairs I do want to mention again, and I did already weave this in, but we were really deliberate in our emphasis of the portrait attributes, which were already emerging at that time. So we jumped right in to make sure that our commitment in technology is to purposefully elevate them. Empowered, inquisitive, inventive, empathetic, bold, collaborative. So the department chairs, and coming out of that district-wide faculty meeting, made the recommendation, and we processed together that teachers could spend time engaging with them as teams and departments, and really thinking about where are the bright spots already? Where are we already doing really well in terms of where the state expects, in terms of the standards? And then they completed grade-appropriate digital workbooks to highlight the extent to which they were already meeting them and where things needed to be augmented. And I'll get up a little bit because I think the best way would be to actually see one of them. So I built a link in here. So here's just a link to the K1 workbook example. This is what an example of the digital workbook looked like. So they would move
Can I just
through.
point out, the link is not, we had to request access to
Oh,
look at it.
okay,
So
I'll make
just-
sure that I make that
we have
live.
to look at it here.
Okay. I'll make sure that I make that live immediately following the presentation.
Speaking of technology.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So here's an example of computational thinking, and this is K1, and the way the state creates the standards, they're banded. So this is a K1 band, and you can see the different standards here. So kindergarten team members were working in the space where you see these white standards, K, CT2, KCT3. So move to the kindergarten standards, and there would be discussion, exchange of work, thinking about practice, and then they made the decisions together as a team. Are they green? Are they all feeling like they're on board with this one and they are aligned? Or are they more yellow, where some people are and some people aren't, or maybe they're somewhat aligned? And so they went through, and it really was an audit, and they went through and took a look at each of these, and again, there were through for each grade level, and working together out where they were, and I removed the notes column here because people were just using it for free, they're just their regular free writing in an informal way, but they were cataloging, like what is it we're doing well, what can we celebrate, and where might we need to augment our alignment.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Just, do you want me to wait till the end?
Is it a workbook specific question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In one of the ones it said like, it was about finding data and blah, blah, blah.
Uh-huh.
Why do they need like technology or a computer to do that?
They don't necessarily need, that's a great question. So that's one of the things that we've been learning about, as we dig into the standards. So they don't necessarily need, a pencil is a technology, right? But when we're thinking about computer science and digital fluency, there are some prerequisite things. So working on logic puzzles then becomes the basis for moving into algorithms and coding, right? So it's a great question because there are things, especially for our earliest learners, where it doesn't necessarily mean they have to have a device in front of them, right? So that's not a necessity for all of those things. However, there is a direct intersection with being fluent in terms of using devices and leveraging technology.
So can they learn it both ways? So they're not just looking at a computer, but they're looking at using a pencil and paper?
I would say it
Doing
depends
things.
on what the standard is asking for. There are many different standards, and some are addressed well, without a device. When you're thinking about logic puzzles, there was an example that came to mind. I think I engaged the board in last year where I remember taking everyone through the exercise of, the chicken cannot be with the dog, and we've got to get the seed to the other side. And right, you didn't need to have a device, but yet if you were then going to use that exercise to develop code, that is like a prerequisite. Whereas, one of the other standards may be directly working with, interfacing from a space of cybersecurity, for example. There may be something in there that you might need directly to work with a device. So I think it's both, and it really is contingent on the standard. Okay, so content curation. So then what we did was, following this work with the alignment audit, and we did call it that, and we were all really comfortable to say, like, let's just take a look at where we are. Then the lead learners got together with myself, the team leaders. In this case, we happened to physically meet at Hillside. The team leaders and coordinators from the elementary school and middle school to dig in more deeply. So we started bringing in some more people. And representatives from grades K through 8 also had the opportunity to work individually with Leslie Cardo after that. So first it was the lead learners, then it was the team leaders, team coordinators. Of course, we did that faculty meeting district-wide, so we're gradually bringing more people in and developing expertise. And then there was a rep from each grade level, K through 8. And with the exception of today, where there was one team that still needed to meet with her, The reps met over the summer, individually, one-to-one, with Leslie Accardo, who's our thought partner from Southern Westchester BOCES. She's absolutely wonderful, and she has tremendous expertise in this area. So she actually went through the workbooks with each individual and started to talk through what are some possibilities, which I'll get into in just a minute. But she dove more deeply into the standards with a rep from each grade who would serve as the turnkey, and to design some more purposeful, innovative, more authentic ways to align. She also worked with Soren Malescu and Ivan Espinoza, our computer science teachers at the high school and middle school, as did I. So I met with them, and then she met with them regarding scope and sequence for computer science and digital fluency. And then, to give you a more concrete example, Leslie's summer work, again with the exception of today, where she met with another teacher just to finish the loop, was really around how do we curate more and design more to get closer to where we want to be with authentic learning tasks and thinking about innovative opportunities, and also thinking about alignment to the standards. So I'll click into a couple of snapshots, and one is an example that highlights my planning with Leslie, and the second is her work directly with the teacher. So I chose grade 8. I just thought we had K1, so we'll move up into the middle school. But this is an example of a summer work session plan. And so Leslie and I had a series of planning meetings where we talked about, what are some next steps? What's our goal? What are some outcomes? What are some things we want to be thinking about for each team? And then reviewing and refreshing work to date, being able to think about our resources, our lesson collection, our curation, and basically what would sharing with colleagues look like. So she and I, and kudos to Leslie who did the heavy lift for the beautiful standards work session paper as you see it, but she and I engaged in this process K8, and we started thinking about what would be helpful based on feedback that we had through the workbooks, things that we heard from the teams, and also her professional expertise in this particular subject matter. So then when she met with the teacher, again, I just pulled a couple of examples. So in the area of computational thinking, it was what's the sub-concept that was being addressed? What does it actually mean? So if you're going to unpack it and make sure you have a deep understanding of it, what does that actually mean? What are some guiding questions that can be associated with this particular sub-concept? What interdisciplinary curricular connections can we be looking at? And then also thinking about some additional examples. And so one example is when reading The House on Mango Street, what conclusions can we make about redlining from interactive maps developed in the 1930s? And then it's around linking in, like interactive maps. So, I mentioned before the idea is to take technology and elevate what's possible. So to be able to go in and use technology to access things where you can then interact and learn more deeply about a topic, and also think about interdisciplinary connections that are very authentic, is really the place we want to be, both from our portrait work and also thinking about the trajectory of technology. You can use it to substitute, like, hey, instead of a book, why don't you do it on the Chromebook or do it on an iPad, or you can do something like this, which is like deeper, more interactive, thinking about an authentic learning task that wouldn't have been possible easily without the use of a device. So that's really where we're headed. So these are just a couple of examples. I just grabbed it just so that you could have something concrete to be thinking about.
I was trying to locate this article that I have to sign up a whole lot to. I had a couple of questions with what you presented with the technology piece, and it had to do with the standards, and I'm getting a whole lot of hoops to get into.
You want to go through why don't we go through the presentation, then come back to them?
Okay.
No, why don't you go through the presentation, then that would be great.
So as I mentioned before, concurrent to the work that we actually anticipated around the computer science and digital fluency standards, AI popped onto the scene, and we could not ignore that. So even though it was not one of our formal goals, neither in our technology plan nor in our conception of where we were going with our computer science digital fluency work. It created the need for some discussion and some preliminary guidance around the use of AI because like it or not, it is at the fingertips of faculty and students. And so initially, as other districts around the region did, initially we chose to block it. So we are able to block certain things on the Wi-Fi here because we needed to learn more about it. You know, when it first emerged, we really needed to understand what are the capabilities, like what's the data privacy and security, what are the pros, what are the cons, what are the possibilities. And so we started learning more about it during Chair Council last year. And so again, Leslie has been a tremendous partner, links, resources, professional learning opportunities, like places to go to learn more about this. And as a Chair Council, we read some articles and we explored generative language model-based chatbots, and ChatGPT was one. We talked a little bit about Bard. There are many things that are popping up here. And then we also, so that was the learning piece. So we were engaging in that. And then behind the scenes, in partnership with our data coordinator, Adriana Boudreau, we were working together, she and I, on engaging ChatGPT in our process to ensure at Law 2D compliance. Meaning, if we decided to unblock it and have students use it, we want to make sure that student data privacy and security is being protected, any personally identifiable information. And we do that with all of our instructional technology applications, by the way. We have to make sure that they are willing to sign off on, really our agreements. We have data privacy agreements that they have to sign, that they are protecting our kids. So we concurrently did this behind the scenes, and they actually signed our document, which was shocking to the region because we may have been the first, I'm hearing, that actually got the sign off. So that's terrific news, and what we've been able to do is start to plan to move forward with providing some access, and that will start with professional learning for the faculty. And so, beyond just the Chair Council. So we have some faculty meetings that have been designed around AI, over the next few months, one for each building, just to understand what the capabilities are and how it can be leveraged and what some of the drawbacks could be. We also have panelists coming to our next Chair Council meeting from our colleagues from Chappaqua, Croton, and North Salem. And like us, regionally, people have been playing with this amongst faculty to think about how AI can be used. Really for students to be successful in their career pathways and social networking, they have to be well-versed in purposeful use of technology, and we can't ignore it. And what we need to do is we need to approach this from a place of trust and respect and eyes open. The biggest concern regionally around the use of ChatGPT was, what about plagiarism? Right? That's a big concern. And at the same time, there are things like Turnitin that are able to detect whether or not something's been created by AI, right? So there are counterbalances for that. But there are so many ways that AI is being now folded in generatively as a support. So for example, building it into an assignment provides a tremendous opportunity to say, start thinking about, a comparison between this text and this text, and what this means for, as it relates to this theme. Okay, use and cite ChatGPT, and now take what you've learned and do a critical analysis of what it's produced for you, right? So that's an example of how you could leverage it into an assignment and then enhance student critical thinking to then be a critical consumer of the information that you've received, right? So there are ways to be working with this very creatively. I used it to create a scavenger hunt for our leadership retreat this summer. And what I did is I identified some places where we were meeting. where I knew I wanted to embed clues, like a little scavenger hunt along the way, and I asked ChatGPT to generate limericks, like rhymes for these things. It was fabulous. It was done in like 8 minutes for a 20-minute activity. It was so quick, just like kind of putting that in there, and it was generating all these. It probably saved me 2 hours, and we had a good time looking for clues and following things and talking about how AI could be leveraged in certain ways to be supportive as well. So we're entering into this carefully. We're entering in with eyes wide open, and we're entering it with the knowledge that people are already using it, and that includes our students.
Let me add something there and communicate a little bit about this with the board over the weekend. Actually, no, yesterday we sent you a memo. Last Friday, one of the regional supers meetings focused on this exact issue, and Byram Hills faculty presented, and it was the department chair presenting from the English department. And the focus there was, in a sense, how, now this is my phrasing, how ChatGPT becomes a teacher aide, teacher assistant.
Yeah.
And it was really advancing the ability of the English department at Byram Hills to make the quality of instruction that much higher. So as the teacher's trying to say, how do I get my class to be interactive around certain literature, they could use ChatGPT with the right kind of prompts to then generate a set of lessons that then give that teacher much more time to get in and apply those lessons. So anyone who is been around with James Stigler and lesson study in Japan, how teachers came together, where they had about 30% of their time out of the classroom paid to create shared lessons. In a sense, that ChatGPT function in Byram Hills within the English department, they're using it that way to create a bank of approaches, and you just immediately begin to see that efficiency that then plays out into what goes on in the classrooms. Now, I was cold called by our leader because I knew that Melissa Szymanski had been leading this effort to get, if you will, the legal sign off, and I didn't have the exact answer. So even though Melissa was right, I texted her, and the laugh line in the room is, my AI is Melissa. You know, but the point was that actually came up when, and it was a great presentation from Byram Hills. We need to get our hands on it. But the question was, what are you doing for other departments? And the answer was, we're not there yet. But if you see, the approach here has been across all departments from the very beginning. So it was an exciting moment for a lot of us as superintendents to say, my goodness, this becomes a no-cost teacher aid, teacher boost. We still got to manage how students work with the material, but not to engage with it would be a really missed opportunity. You can see we also in Hastings be at a competitive disadvantage for our students not to engage. So I just wanted to put that in there. Melissa, keep going.
Yeah. And on a human note at the table, if ever you are struggling with what to, make for dinner for the chefs out there, and you have 5 ingredients in your fridge, you can actually use ChatGPT to say, send me a recipe, I have these things, and it'll make, it won't make you dinner for you yet, but it'll create the pathway for you to clean out your fridge when you only have some limited items. So
Just take it when it'll make the dinner.
yeah, I think there are creative uses for it, and also cautions as well. So we're entering into this eyes wide open and in close contact with our regional colleagues. Our department chairs have been working on a position statement, and that's in progress. And really the buckets are, who are the users, and it's really a tool for everyone, and that our vision is to preserve equity in the educational process, and that students at all levels can use it, thinking about academic impacts, using it as a resource, using it as a new way of looking at things, using it to differentiate, understanding that we don't want anyone to be too reliant on it, and they can make mistakes. It can be generative, but it shouldn't be a final product. So we're working through that right now. And then some technological considerations as well. Screen time. So this is something that is a hot topic everywhere. And again, that's largely related to the things that we've just been exploring. The technology is widely used in our world, and it is readily available. So we need to be conscious of how much time students are spending on devices to ensure that it's being used productively. I'd like to revisit what was shared 1 year ago, just about a year ago, October of last year, around feedback that came, and this is a sample banded by grade about, in what ways are students using devices to leverage learning currently. And you see everything at the younger grades for short instructional clips. At the time, they were using Wixie, intervention support, thinking about Google, multimedia access, differentiation. And then as students get a little bit older, we're thinking about more around presentations, assignments, access to activities, world language activities and target languages. Thinking about the writing process, research, drafting, revisions, editing, publishing. So you start to see more of those assignment-based uses of technology. And then monitoring. This was a sample from last year as well. So how are students being monitored to ensure they're on task? So circulating, the programs actually showed where students are, so along the way the progress that they're making, teacher supervision, project completion, to what extent are projects being completed. There's accountability, especially in the older grades, naturally when students are working together in groups and they need to be accountable to their group and participating, and the quality of work that they're producing. So you can see some of those variations that were reported to us by grade band. And I will say I've been doing a lot of thinking about this, and I think it can be a tough one because at least when I was younger, the big thing was passing notes in class, right? And I think now this is like the equivalent of the passing notes in class sometimes when people get pulled, into doing other tasks on technology. And that is a very strong pull sometimes both for students and for adults, right? Thinking about that it's at your fingertips and it's something to be used. But wanting to also make sure that students are leveraging technology for those ways that I was outlining earlier in the presentation, much more innovative, engaging ways.
And before moving, this is something Melissa and I talked a fair amount about during as she was preparing the presentations. The roundtables I did last spring underscored from the students, particularly in the middle school, underscored from students and parents, we really got to optimize screen time. It is, I think, a little bit too much, has been at times something that students get to go to when they're done with the assignment. Well, was the assignment in class proficient enough to be, using the time correctly, or not? So it is something I want to dig into more and understand better, but we really do understand that it's something that we got to pay attention to. We're not alone in this issue, but it's why it's here as a visible piece of this presentation.
Scott Wynn, our middle school principal, just recently sent something out to the faculty around, just that gentle reminder around, when there's downtime, really making sure that there's instructional focus and that tech is not being used for any kind of gaming or YouTubing or anything like that, and I thought that was, that was timely, so I just mentioned I just happened to see that one particular reminder come out recently. But also, as part of our curriculum review cycle and our portrait work, being able to work, again, side by side around thinking about productive uses of technology, much in the same way that Leslie has been doing, with those digital goodie bags that she's been working on one-to-one with people from each grade. Because I think part of it, too, is there is a very strong art and science to providing instruction to students. And there are a lot of people in a space that have a lot of different needs. And really thinking about elevating our craft and working with technology to ensure that there's really purposeful, strong work going on and building on that great stuff to make it even better and more transformative. So it's a work in progress for sure. I think it will always be imperfect, just like having a piece of paper when I was a student was imperfect because sometimes it could end up in a note in someone else's hand or not, right? But I do think that's a normal part of negotiating the childhood boundaries on the brain and the adults stepping into to help with that monitoring process and to help create some of those parameters and to make sure that the tech that's being used is really invigorating and energizing in ways that are inventive. So, in conclusion, we've done a lot and we still need to do more. So that's been what's happened since last year. And our upcoming efforts, I mentioned, are AI professional learning, and that's occurring at the faculty meetings that are coming up now through January. I did link in a professional support roadmap. I'll go back in after this meeting, and I'll make sure that everything is visible. But this professional support roadmap, I can click in, again, was in partnership. Leslie and I planned together. And then our ongoing examination of device use for the authentic learning, and how we're leveraging it, what we're doing to limit, and that, again, it will be a work in progress. I'm not sure why. There we go. Okay. But basically, so this is like Leslie and I, we meet regularly, and we're back and forth, and we're currently at a space where we're planning for, and pardon me, there we go. We're planning for, this isn't aligning properly at the moment. We're planning for the people that she did the one-to-one work with to be able to then turnkey to their team. And we're setting up a half day at each building for certain grade bands to be able to do that. And that'll be ongoing. It can't be a one and done. So that's a brief update on our technology work. Lots going on. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. I was trying to put it all together. But you were at a point, you were at a slide before the AI, and I wanted to say something about it.
The workbook one?
When Dr. Marcus wanted.
You were on this one, the K-8.
Yes, the question I had for you was that, so the standard, they had a new one. Is this the updated one?
This is updated to whatever's current. So the Computer Science Digital Fluency Learning Standards, I'm just pulling it up in front so I don't make a misstatement. So they have 5 key concepts that they're focusing on. Impacts of computing, computational thinking, that was the example that I showed, networks and systems design, cybersecurity, and digital literacy.
Okay.
So there was work done in each of those areas. I just thought to provide a brief snapshot for tonight.
Okay. And then I think the Department of Education, did they ban AI? I thought at some point they said.
I did not see that.
Okay.
I think that the
They were
caution,
having a conversation about it, but I thought
they're
they said
trying
no.
they're trying to figure out how to best leverage it. My understanding from regional conversations and also conversations happening both lateral to my role and above my role was really around making sure that we're legally protecting
Okay,
students
got it.
and that
Which is what
they're
you
willing to
need.
sign off and that Ed Law 2D compliance.
Got it.
When I got the sign off back, I read the fine print, and it allowed us to have the partnership through October. And so we approached them again and said, that's not long enough, and then they extended it. But, it's a constantly keeping an eagle eye on making sure that we're protecting student data privacy and security too.
Okay.
So I think the conversations that are happening are much broader, my understanding is, than just education, really thinking about AI in general and what are the capabilities and I think to the extent from an instructional lens that we have very strong parameters and an understanding of what we're hoping to achieve from it, and we're making sure that we have sign-offs and people are protected, we're in a really good space actually.
Okay, so now that I've done with the technical question, I was trying to get some information that I mean technology and school change is affecting everybody. We're all figuring it out, and I would say kudos to you for making it what do you call it, the whole district, a district approach, because that has been one of the downfalls that they are realizing is happening with the educational system because of the fragmentation that is going on with technology, where there is not that systemic approach. And when there's not a systemic approach, it's not done properly. And then it creates that reliance that doesn't allow equity, or it doesn't allow the proper instructional process that has to enter. So I want to start off by saying that. However, I can't help it but to read this quote. That's what I was looking for. Because I think it will be useful to all of us, even as parents that are trying to teach our kids at home and do the best we can, or get additional support. This blew my mind, and I'd like to share it. So it says, I left my glasses, so sorry, I'm doing this. So it says, the ongoing advancement of technology.
Really well?
Probably. Who knows? I'd love
Close
it.
enough.
So it says the ongoing advancement of technology follows its own trajectory. It will continue to grow in strength, become more cost effective, because at first the reason why they said no technology, I look like Judy. The reason why they said no technology was cost inequities was one of the big issues. So it says become more cost effective and increasingly accessible. However, the main aim is to keep refining instructional methods to ensure we are, drum roll, this is the part, we are, right now that's the reality, at the mercy of a powerful but intrinsically aimless phenomenon. And that just blew all of us our minds, because nobody knows the direction of technology and whether it's going to be Terminator 10 or something.
Oh my God, I hope not.
Well,
Yeah.
AI people are talking about, we have to do with technology. Technology have to be in school for us to understand its work. So that part, knowing about technology and not being at the mercy of it, and its aimless advancement is to our advantage as a human race to be able to know when to shut it off if chaos happens. And we cannot not have it in school for our students to have mastery over such a machine. And so how the school is going to design it, I don't know. But at some point, there's no technology that students should not be familiar with. If we are going to assign exploring technology as a subject matter where they get to play with it and know it, at least just know it, not because we are relying on it, but just know it, is so important. So that, I mean, again, I know you are working through the specifics and approach. And so that's one thing that I know that we must expose our kids to all kinds of technology and in a guided way. So that being said, and I think, that being said, the restrictive part is important because now we don't want them to rely on it for what they do now. So the second thing I'm going to say, which is the last thing I'm going to say, will look a little bit contradictory to what I just said, but hear me out. There is, this one is very long, so I don't want to read it, but basically, what it's saying here is that pedagogy should be the aim and technology should assist the pedagogy. Because if pedagogy is not the aim and technology is in front of the pedagogy, then that's where a lot of parents are concerned. And so, and that makes sense because then we are allowing pedagogy to lead. And I'll cite two examples to express what I'm saying. I remember at some point, microscopes were getting expensive and uptake was getting expensive. So some colleagues were like, oh, it's obstinate. Let's get rid of microscopes and use digital, use a compound microscope where you have to focus and 10 knobs around. And some of us educators said no, because you still need to know, yes, you can press buttons, but you still need to understand the elements of the property of how microscopy works and not just depend on pressing buttons. And then another colleague said how calculators, like you said in your data passing papers, calculators was a big issue. But then what is happening is that because pedagogy, technology was not following pedagogy, when a student gets something wrong, the teacher's like, you press the wrong button. What? That is problematic. You know, is it the button or it has to do with understanding the concept? So that is the pitfalls of pedagogy. And then the last thing that I'm hoping that we would, which has to do with the AI piece, is that these artificial intelligence are picking knowledge that we put out there. And every semester, I would ask students, how do you do research? And most of the time, I know Hastings students are smart. My students are smart too, but anyway. But what I'm getting at is that the thought of research is looking for information out there. It has never been about adding your own information. And so that conversation, I'm hoping, can change from they can tell us, because whatever it's telling us is because somebody put it there. And how do we empower students to harness their creative minds to enrich the body of knowledge that is out there, which the AI is speaking to tell us? Does that make sense? And so I'm hoping that in all of it, I mean, it was a great conversation. I felt I should bring it here because I'm like, oh, it was something new I learned myself. So I wanted to throw it out there.
So the question I have to follow up to you is, it feels, I mean, this is like a whole new world that people have to, it's like, how's there enough time in the day? And enough days in the week and weeks in the year. Obviously, we have to do it, and I guess I wonder, how do you think about, how do we, I don't want to say monitor, because it's not the right word, but
Assess?
Maybe, or how do we know what teachers, and I don't mean it in a way that I'm not trusting them, but how do we know how it's being used in the class and ways in which it's being used and how much it, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
And I don't even need an answer, but I'm thinking that that's something that I would think about.
I think, I mean, my gut on that one is, as with anything else, and this is new, and it's just on the scene, and it's here. It's not going anywhere.
Right.
There will be people who are extremely comfortable as pioneers who like to play with it, and they will say, hey, this is so cool, check this out. And they'll start sharing, and the way that we know is simply by asking. And I think to that point, Jody, it's really important that we continue to have a culture where when we get in a room together around curriculum work, and I've been very fortunate to have this thus far with the smaller groups that I've worked with, you know, if we're doing math work at Hillside, or if we're doing, you know, the health and PE work that we've done. And, you know, and that transcends just Hastings for me. So over time and over different places, really important to create a culture where people show their cards and they say, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm not doing, and it's not for fear of retribution, because then we can say, okay, there's a real reason why you might not be doing that. Let's talk about it and let's get there. And to feel safe to be able to experiment with some of these things, or to say, I'm not there yet. I'd feel more comfortable learning alongside my colleague around it. You know, I think we ask them, you know, and I think that's the only way to do it. Like just talking through the department chairs, the coordinators, the team leaders, you know, how's it going? To what extent is this, you know, being used? Because you can get snapshots based on what, you know, you see or what kids are saying, but you can't really get a whole day's worth of, you know, or a whole week's worth of consistent data for everybody, unless you just ask and you make sure that the culture is right to say, hey, you know, I'm not using it, here's why, or I am.
Thank you.
But absolutely. I think it's, you know, all of this presents some very neat opportunities for us. And, you know, Dr. Lang, you mentioned a couple of things too that caught my attention. We're thinking, even in the faculty meeting planning, there are equity pieces around all this that we really need to attend to. And I want to thank Janice for flagging one of these, which is that when people are using applications like Turnitin to see if something is plagiarized, right, or if something is AI generated, disproportionately, what a couple of articles have now come forth with is that if you are an English language learner, it's misattributed to it being AI generated. So coming in with that lens is really important. So we think about who are our students, who's sitting in front of us, like to what extent might this be flagged incorrectly, and just being really, really sensitive to who our learners are and possible bias in use of technology. Even when you're thinking about washing your hands, automatic faucets, or it's certain things, or facial recognition. There are certain biases that are introduced in technology. We have to keep an eye on that, right? Like, this is all very important, and at the same time, we need to be working well with it in transformative ways.
Soap dispenser, it doesn't recognize.
Yes. No, that's
Wow.
Yes, that is. Yeah, that is.
Right,
and that's very important.
I feel like it doesn't recognize my hands.
So a question, Melissa, I guess on that. There's no AI kind of allowed in school, right? Like
Right
the
now,
applications
it's locked.
currently. But at home, the way to, like, say, write an essay about what we read, right? I think it's going to challenge teachers. I love the examples of, like, upping your game, giving you new ideas. I love the idea of, use AI and then point out what was wrong. I think that's a really great starting point, because we have to kind of be critical of the information we're receiving. That's as much the issue, right? Like, we have to be critical thinkers, critical readers. But how is that getting done now? Like, how, besides this check, turn it in or whatever, is that like a standard that teachers are using that to compensate for? At home, people might be using AI, and like, if you ask it differently, you give it a couple of different, like, there's so many possibilities, right? How could they, I don't know. I'm just wondering, like, on the home front, people might be using it. How are the teachers going to know, outside of this, I guess, check the checker?
Yeah, I think the first concern that was raised, if you will, there was positive energy around use of AI. And with that, the first concern that was used is, how are we going to know if a student wrote this or not, right? And being able to really think that through, sometimes with students, like having those conversations. I don't think right now, based on what I'm hearing, that this is being widely used by students or faculty in our system. So even if they turn the Wi-Fi off, right, they are using it. I think we would be very naive to say students aren't using it. Like, you can turn off the Wi-Fi and have access to it, right? But I think already before AI came on the scene, Turnitin was something that was being used, to check for plagiarism. So it's just a different lens around how you're working with Turnitin. Whether something was written by more like, a generative AI versus, was it taken from a different source that wasn't generative AI, right? So it's just a different lens. I don't think that practice will change, but I do think that for the most part, I think the lens, I want to try to get us away from that lens as a system, because I don't see that as a technology issue. I think that's more of an ethics issue, and developing, moral development of how you're going to function as a learner. And if you're going to need that, cite it, right? Just say, this is what I've used, and here's where I made my modifications, right? So I think that's concurrent to all of this, is that personal development that we're doing with children, right? To make sure that we are helping people along and using things and in ways that are ethical, and that includes their peer relationships, how they're working with their devices, how they're completing their assignments. I feel like I kind of talked around your question, because there's not a direct answer that
There is
I have
no good
yet,
answer, right?
but philosophically, that's where we are.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I would add to it, because it wasn't in the confines of it, but now that I brought it up, one of the things that we also discussed at the Technology and School Change talk was assessment. And so assessment can change in such a way that it would not allow for AI generated. There are all kinds of ways in which you can assess students. So for example, I would ask my students to go write on a replication essay. They get AI to write it on them. But when they come to class, they are supposed to answer even choice questions right there and there. on that same information and let's see how they fare. The number of points for that in-class test, which is 10 questions and multiple choice, which seems to be easy, maybe 60% of the points. And that essay, which in the past used to be more because there was no ChatGPT, will now be just 20%.
Yeah.
And so that part has to do with how you assess the student, because like you said, ethics is ethics. It's different from technology. And prior to AI, people were finding ways to cheat. So as an instructor, you have to figure that out. Dr. Marcus Samansky, I wanted to ask, I heard the conversation, but I know that you said it's an ongoing thing. I'm just hoping that the fact that this beast of technology is just going and you don't know where it's going, I'm hoping that the next time that you provide us with the presentation, we can at least, I would like to know a clear sense of a more like a systemic approach. So like in terms of the systemic goal approach, okay, so Hastings is going to use AI as a way to do right? And each instructor would produce their own process in order to meet that goal, right? And one of the things that came out in that conversation was which I found useful, and I just want to share it. So I'm just saying my board comment right here too, which I thought was useful, was that being ambitious with a smaller goal, not like it's important. So that was what was like the driving conversation. Start with something small like ChatGPT or something. But then there was that problem, is that technology is running. New things are coming, so how do you catch up if you're just going to start with small, like just ChatGPT? So that's when it came that's when that idea was put in front, that there can be a structured space where students get to explore all kinds of technology. And you'll be surprised how students will even bring more that teachers are not aware of, exists in the prunings somewhere. And so that way it allows for, it becomes a student's own high, it becomes a learning, and how they can use this technology as educational technology within that conversation that is carved within instruction. But then as the systemic approach is, okay, let's start with AI. How can AI fit our pedagogy? So I'm just hoping that the next presentation, if that can be clear, that'll be
Ours is
helpful.
really, yes, absolutely, and ours is really currently around how can AI be used to leverage what we need with the portrait, frankly.
Got it.
And the position statement that everyone is working on at Chair Council is also the nitty-gritty on like what are some academic impacts we're thinking about. But it is all under the portrait umbrella. So yes, it's our world and it has to be woven. And I will say, I'll end with a funny little anecdote. I had a student interview me at the end of last year around the use of AI. And one of the questions was, can you tell which of these questions was generated by AI? And I thought that was pretty brilliant. And so I, of course, fed all the questions back into ChatGPT. And I said, smart idea. I think it's this one. And so we had a funny little back and forth about that.
And was it?
I never got closure on that. I'm going to have to
It's probably a sign you were right.
like, now that you mentioned that. Yeah. But it was just such a funny moment. And I was like, but that's what you want, right? This creative, generative use and then leveraging technology towards a very key goal, which is she wanted to understand my perspective and where we were headed, knowing that this is a thing in our world. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Wait, I just have another quick comment. I didn't get a chance to say anything. So thanks for the presentation. I've been talking for, as you know, 2 years about my disdain of technology in school, so it's nothing new, and you know what I'm going to say. But, I always go back to especially for the middle schoolers, I don't really have much experience with the high school yet, but it's very difficult for a child when the tool that you use for work is the same tool that you use for entertainment, and they don't have very much of a impulse control ability. And my main concern here also is that they don't really have any, like, their brain doesn't get any downtime. You can look in my notebook and you can see all the doodling that I do, and your mind wanders. And studies show that doodling helps, and you can tell a lot by a person by the kind of doodles they do. But their minds are never down. There's never downtime, because they don't have pens and paper in front of them. I mean, my kids have classes where they just only are on the computer the whole time. So, and I think it's important to note that, it's not, the kids aren't using computers just when they're done with work and the teachers say that they can use them. They're doing them while they're using it while the teachers are teaching. I hear this from my own kids, I hear it from my kids' friends, and I hear it from other parents. It's during class. So it's not just when they have downtime. They're just like on other things. They're not paying attention. And I get it. Like in the old days, you would just stare out the window because you were bored, but now you can't even be bored. You have to stare at it. So it is a problem, and I'm not sure how to monitor it, but we can't fool ourselves or think that it's only happening at the end of class. It's not. It's happening during class as well. There's secondary effects of myopia is rising in kids, and that most of the work has to be done on a computer. I can't remember which class it was, but my kid asked if they could do it in paper and hand it in, because that was the best way for them to think about it. And the answer was no, because they have to do it on the computer, because then the computer grades it, so the teacher doesn't have to grade it. So it automatically goes through. So they didn't even have the option to hand in a piece of paper if they wanted to, which I think is also unfortunate. And, I also, my daughter told me that she has to use her phone now in class. Now, whether that's true or not, I'm not sure. Again, I'm going to the source is not always accurate. But I'm told, because she has her phone turned off during the day. She has no screen time during the day. And she's told us that she has to, we have to unlock her phone. She's required to use it to take a picture, to take a video, or do something during class. I can talk to you afterwards about which teacher this is, and if you want to find out if that's actually true or not, I don't know. But that's another problem that I'm like, because my husband and I were like, you already have a computer. Why do you need to use your phone too? I don't know what the answer to that is. So, I'm just finding that I see that kids, they don't know what to do with themselves if they don't have a phone. They don't know what to do. I told you the sad story about last year when my son came home from the first day of school and his 3 friends came over, and the 3 of them, he doesn't have a phone, and the 3 of them sat on their devices, and he was just like, you want to do something? And no one wanted to do anything. I mean, because they just have become, it's an addiction. It's a terrible, terrible addiction, and I hate to think that we're feeding that addiction at school as well. So I don't know what the answer is. I don't want them to not have technology. I get it. We don't want them to have kids who don't have this, nobody has to be a Luddite.
Stone Age.
Right, exactly. But I don't know what the answer is, and I know it's challenging, but I just see it getting worse and worse and worse every year. And I as much as we can prevent it, I would appreciate, if we could take them out of the class entirely, I would be thrilled with that. I know that we're not going back to that, but I don't know what the answer is, but they are using it during class. They're playing games, they're searching on the website, they're going to websites, they're going to YouTube. And I don't know the
I
answer is.
really appreciate what you just said, Doreen, a lot.
Yeah, I appreciate it too, and I see this more as a classroom management, because you should be that's why technology must follow pedagogy. If you are using it for whatever you're using, when you're done 10 of your computers, we are doing this assignment. My phones can be used only maybe you're doing Kahoots or something where there's some technology thing that you need to press. So everybody using their phone, it makes it easier.
Well, what if
because
everybody
of the
doesn't have a
software.
phone?
Yeah.
That's true. That brings inequities thing. And
Right.
sometimes in labs, they take the pictures of what they see, and then they're able to magnify it and see things. It's a surprise. I mean, well, college is different, but again, I think this is classroom management, and I agree with you. Too much screen is not good. It's not, the fact that we have to explore technology is not an excuse for a student to be on screen. But I see that, again, once we hear more of the systemic, because and that's one of the things that we're talking about. If there's a systemic goal, of what is being done, what to, yes, you exploring technology at a set time. Explore all you want at a set time. However, when it comes to pedagogy with the individual courses, this is the way that we are going to use technology. Then it's structure. And that's why they said we cannot defragment it and let instructors, because then what you are saying is what is happening. And some courses may require more technology use than others. For example, handwritten stuff, 1018 may not be able to read it. So it may require the typing, but it doesn't mean everything. You get what I mean? So again, if the pedagogy is not clear and how the technology is supporting it, then that's how come you can weigh what is valid and what is not. Does that make
Right.
sense?
In many ways, I think the train has left the station, but I think that,
Well, I think
try
it's
to slow
quite,
it down.
what I'm sort of hearing, I think is interesting, that, the key question, really, when it comes to technology, to me, is it displacing our generative capacity that we have as people, or is it enhancing it? And that's really the dividing line. And when it's diminishing it, then that's bad technology. That's when like these amps go to 11 moment, where you think, you don't really understand what's behind the thing, and that's sort of the lazy, bad use of technology, where it substitutes for our own generative capacity. And what you're sort of hinting at, which I think is interesting, is some of humans' generative capacity comes from being bored, or having to think of something, or having to sort of interact in a sort of impromptu moment. And those moments are part of our generative capacity. So how does that survive in pedagogy?
but that is a point that I'm making, Alex, but it's also, this is a problem and we need to help our kids.
No, I agree.
And we're not helping our kids by not watching what they're doing and seeing that they're on, and by having them be on screens all the time. I mean,
No, I think we need to.
The addiction part of it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think I'm very happy that we're taking sort of an early, thoughtful, deliberative, actionable approach to it. I was having a conversation with some friends online about would anybody want to read. This is just, I couldn't type it.
The irony, right?
About would anybody want to read books written by AI, and one of them had a line which I thought was really true, which is, why would I be bothered to read a book that someone wasn't bothered to write? And I feel like if the children from this school know why that's a salient difference, if they learn in their humanities study why that's a salient difference, that's a great part of the technology piece. It's not in the standards, but to me, that's the right question. So thank you very much. Any other questions?
I just want to say, I think there's two things. There's the computer technology literacy aspect, and then, like you said, Damaris, there's the classroom management. And I don't know whose jurisdiction that falls under. You're coming at it from a curricular perspective. And then there's the other side, the flip side of it, which is why are they on screen so much in school? And what exactly are they doing? And are we facilitating this mind-numbing culture at school? Which is, I think, it's different than what you're talking about tonight.
Correct. Sure.
Yeah, it's a big question, deep one. And I feel like we're paying attention to it, and I thank all of you for the comments putting into that, because it's all important, different angles on that.
I'd really love to, if we could circle back to this and address the questions.
So incredibly briefly, but I think in a big way, if we're able to move on the action plans for authentic learning within the portrait, this is exactly where you dig into that question. As FMS leadership is looking at coming up with faculty input, what's the future for FMS, this is the exact place to look at that. And so I assure the board that this question's front and center in that core look, and that's the only way to get at it correctly is, and I think your question about it, very powerful, are we displacing or enhancing our generative capacity? That's another phrase for authentic learning, just plain English. That's a big phrase, generative learning, but I woke up for that one, by the way. But no, I'm serious. Just to assure the board, we have two places to go after this. One, the authentic learning work, and then subset of that is what FMS is going to dig into.
Okay, good. Thank you all very much.
Yeah, I think that, like, just thinking about what you said, you're right, because what we're talking about is like, what you're presenting is how we can use it and what that looks like, but the outcome of that might be the downstream effects of the harm to our kids. So it's the balancing of that, and making sure that we're not, for the sake of doing something great, we're not doing something bad.
Thank you. Moving on to public comment, there is no public, so we move into business items. Are there any questions or comments about business items number 1 through 8?
No. I have a couple of questions. The restorative, hold on, I'm sorry, I have all these open on my desktop. The restorative practices, one, sorry, here it is, I got it. The guy who wrote the book is coming to present to the teachers, is that what's happening?
No.
Oh.
So there's a pre-training workshop. So basically what we've done is some design for our restorative practice work. So we have Duke Fisher, who's facilitating some professional learning. Before Duke comes, Janice and Camila are doing some priming work for the participants and through text-based discussions and really concrete boots on the ground strategies around the why of use of restorative practices, how they differ in terms of those like hard accountability, consequence pieces, rewards pieces. And so the book is really to prime the work that's going to be happening in the workshop with Duke. So there's pre-work being led by our internal leadership, and then there's Duke, who's also doing the immersive facilitation, and then some additional coaching on what restorative practices can be when they come.
He's the guy who wrote the book, though, right?
I don't think so.
No, it's a Dominic, it's a
I don't
Fisher.
think so.
It is a Fisher who wrote the
Oh,
book.
I'm sorry, I think he's the second author on it then. Because there's a
I'm not
woman.
I
sure.
opened it up because I read
Take
it.
a look.
Yeah,
Dominique something.
Dominique Smith is the one, but he's the guy, the first listed author is, wait,
It's
hold on.
No, it's Nancy Frey and Doug Fisher, no relationship.
Okay.
Duke, Doug, wow.
Right, yeah, I knew,
Yeah,
okay,
no
that's, okay.
relationship. Yeah.
Um,
I had to double check myself.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking that. No.
I looked up the book on, I mean, I haven't read the book obviously, but I looked it up on Amazon, and the only, I mean, it has mostly great reviews, which
Yeah.
is good. The only thing I would say, like, a couple of things that just kept coming up over and over in the reviews was that it was more, like, there was lots of anecdotes, but that people felt like they didn't have, like, hard strategies for, well, like, here's what you should actually do in the class. I mean, I haven't read the book, so I have no idea. And that some of the more senior people were like, I'm a senior teacher, and I knew all this, and I didn't, it's not as helpful as I wanted. So I'm sure you're working on that, but just something, I know that
No, that's
when it comes
helpful.
to professional development, I know I've heard sometimes from some of the teachers who are more experienced teachers here that they're like, I wish it was something that I already get. I know this part. I just wish it was a little bit. That's all I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, and we met in terms of our pre-planning to think about making some of that very explicit. So I very much appreciate that comment, because I think that with anything that we're implementing, knowing the purpose behind it is number one, but also what to do, how to do it, and why it's important.
Mhm.
Like, what is it exactly you're doing, and how do you make those moves, and then what's the why behind each of those moves is really important to make it concrete.
Yeah, I think the how especially, because I think that we've got pretty much everybody on board with the idea of it. So the
Yeah.
why, I think, is like check for most
Yeah.
people. It's the how that people are feeling like stressed out about.
Yeah, and we felt that that was best tackled by our internal people, the explicit how. I think when we partner with anyone outside, thought partners have different areas of strength, right? And I think what the decision was in our pre-planning process when we were thinking about our progression for rolling through that restorative practices work and moving it forward, that it was Camila and Janice that would be really the concrete boots on the ground, also designing a template of look for, so that when the work with Duke is happening, there's also that concrete element that's brought in through the pre-reading and also the explicit look-fors. This particular text was recommended through the Association for Supervision and Curriculum.
It has a lot of great reviews. I was
Yeah,
just
it's-
pointing out the couple
yeah,
of things.
No, it's great.
Yeah, sometimes I know that, again, a lot of what I say is higher ed, but I know that sometimes the prescriptive or explicit way is avoided a lot. Examples are used because organically each space is different, and even with text, teachers have to do pre-teach before you, if there's sensitive material, and we've had issues with that here. If there's sensitive text that you want students to learn a content, but the text has a sensitive social, political connotation to it, you do a pre-teaching. If you don't do a pre-teaching,
Yeah, it makes sense.
you just create issues because then people feel attacked and feel less than or whatever happens. And so I'm very happy that a pre-learning is happening in order to prepare the information. And sometimes and most of the time the how comes with the dialogue that goes on with the example that has come from the text, because it can organically shape based on the culture and the space and the issues that are present. Because what again, I think one of the things I said early years when I was here was that what you would use for Alabama is not what you can use here. So if you are an educator and you create this prescriptive how, people will just toss your material away. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you.
My other question was about Center Lane. I see where you want to hire them again. And my question is around the plan for the partnership under point 2, which is providing curriculum support and revising elementary lessons to include more gender-specific information. And I was wondering if you could highlight that a little bit and explain it to me, what you're thinking of.
Sure. So, the implementation from last year was around certain elements of the lesson plan were not being specific around certain gender-based concepts. Again, developmentally appropriate, thinking about, I can't give a concrete example at the moment, but thinking about the exact lesson that happened, so that's once, at each grade level, that they felt like they missed the mark on certain things and they felt like they could have gone in a different direction with other things. So having the external thought partner to really sit with them and taking a look at the lessons that were created, thinking about what they learned from working with it with students, feedback from the faculty, and then thinking about enhancements to include more gender-specific information, especially at the littler ages. Amy had received some of that feedback directly, both from internal and from external, like thinking about how certain things may have missed the mark and could have been a little bit stronger, better, a resource could have been curated a little bit differently. And so being able to work with Center Lane again around that, being able to work through that.
What do you mean exactly? I'm sorry, I'm not following.
So that the lesson really was more global rather than around what they were intending to do, which is elevating exploration of gender at the earlier grades, either through language being used, through content being used, but that there was a need to do some deeper work to make sure that the purpose, which was around teaching into gender, was actually the thing that was happening. That it was naturally a part of the lesson rather than an incidental part of the lesson, that there was deliberate planning around it.
And what kind of teaching around gender do we feel that we should be doing exactly?
Well, I think, as with
The exploration of gender for younger kids?
I think as with anything, especially now, in a world that's incredibly divisive, like being able to honor each other's differences and thinking about what children are encountering in their day, in their world, in their conversations. And so it's really around being responsive both to the students and also providing external windows into the world and thinking about students, and that, if somebody wants to take a ballet class and they're a boy, that's okay. Or thinking about if, someone wants to wear blue and they're a girl, that's lovely, right? That there are things that are traditionally associated with gender, and even at the early elementary age, being able to explore some of those concepts to honor each other's uniqueness.
I'm glad you said that, because, I was upset about a letter that went out to the parents a number of years ago that said that gender is how you like to dress and what you like to do, suggesting that if you like to do ballet, then perhaps you're not a boy, that you might not, you should think about your gender. And so that, I think that's the confusing part that I think for children to understand, and I don't believe in that at all. And the other thing too is that I feel like, listen, I'm not sure what studies have shown how effective these programs are. I think that we're seeing sometimes that there's a little bit of a backlash against them. I think we've seen just with the attack on Israel that we're becoming tribal, and your people aren't the whole person anymore. You're this or you're that. And I want to make sure that we're not telling kids you're this and this is your person.
Doreen, these are excellent questions, and I think the specifics on that gender specific, that number 2 are I think we're hoping the board will support this tonight. We can then come back to you with specifics on the specifics, but I can assure you, having sat through the training and listened, that this is about inclusion and honoring and recognizing students wherever they're landing on the gender spectrum. And it's not about guiding or directing them to get to a particular place. So that's where the letter reference you mentioned, I don't know about that letter. I mean, I would hope that wasn't recently that we would send out a letter that says, based on X, you should be Y.
It was a couple of years ago.
But rather, right now, we're really trying to, in an environment where it's critical we honor and respect everyone as to who they are, that's at the earliest ages what we're trying to do. Honor and respect who you are, and not drive you to be somebody.
Right.
And support.
Or that if you are that person,
Right.
it doesn't matter, that's not your whole person.
Right.
You're black, but you're not only black, that isn't your whole person.
Well, it's
It's
that.
this tribalism that I get very scared of.
Yeah, well, I think this is an attempt to plant seeds of dignity in all of our students so they have a better chance of letting that flower, so they don't get into that divisive place. And if they start going there, we've got tools to work with to guide them back to being inclusive and not tribalist, if you will, just to use your phrasing.
Okay.
I mean,
It's
that's.
helpful to hear, Bill,
I-
your experience of going through it.
Yeah, and of observing it, I'm going to be clear, and I'm a parent this day and age, and I have to relate as a parent, and
I mean,
You know,
I saw the
it's-
presentation too, and I found some of it not so positive and a little disturbing myself. That's why I'm questioning them coming back and what they're going to be teaching us. But if you will update us with what those changes might be, then I'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think that even when we did you know how most of curriculum information, like courageous conversations, all those things are out there. So I'm not sure if this is out there somewhere for parents to see what is really out, just like,
Yeah,
because I remember we did something on race.
If I may, in the sessions for families, and some reacted, by and large reacted well, and they're legitimate and good questions, and those have to be respected. But there are a set of materials that we have been open and explicit about.
Correct.
And I think it's an area that deserves ongoing attention from the board, so you can understand it, so the community can understand it.
I mean, I'm just saying that when this whole race situation happened, courageous conversation came, some parents who now understand the whole race issue we're able to appreciate it only because of the openness of the information on courageous conversation.
Right.
Some did not care less for it, they thought it wasn't effective. Others were able to see, okay, we need to improve it. We all know there's always improvement. So
I don't
think
feel
that
like Courageous Conversations is open at all. We have no idea what's being taught in there.
Well, there was a place that you could go and you see it. So what I'm getting at is that something similar can be created where at least you know the topics. Because courageous conversation, we could see the topics at least.
It's on the curriculum.
It's on, yeah, it's on there. I've seen it before. So I'm saying that with this, I think that it's fair that this can be provided as
Yeah,
well. So
sorry.
that there's some things that may be nebulous to others, they can see it. And again, to what Dr. Makesi said, for me, I don't like when marginalized becomes hegemony to Trump. So two wrongs don't make right. So I hear what you're saying. If you are reversing it, then whatever, that's not equity, right? So I get what you're saying, but from what Dr. Makesi said, that is not the intention. So hopefully the whole process will continue in a way that will hit the mark like it's supposed to hit.
If I may, as a board, you have to make choices about what you want to concentrate on. I think the whole previous topic is an excellent one, the digital learning technology, to not use the exact phrase, but that's what we just talked about. And really making sure that's surfacing in the work with the portrait, and at least at FMS. What's important here to me is this is now a partnership with a single entity district-wide, which gives us, in challenging work, gives us a better chance at having the right answers. Because if we had one partner here, one partner there, we're likely to create some incoherence and some struggle. So, but it's up to you as a board as you set the agenda, but you may want to, is there time in the next couple months, hear from a number of the people directly involved in the buildings with Center Lane, because it's now K-12, or at least the three buildings, let me be more precise, the three buildings, that just say, what's happening? Bring that to life for us.
Right.
I think that'd be a fair ask and a reasonable presentation.
Yep, and my concern is when I see elementary and gender specific. Middle school and high school get it, they're growing, it's different. K through 2, it's very confusing. The whole subject is confusing, and there's no real scientific backing against what we're being taught that we should be teaching, so.
Yeah, so I think in the meantime, we can bring you more clarity on what that means. I do hope we can move ahead with this partnership, because it helps us work within an area that we really have to be working in.
I'm going to vote, but I have two questions. What is the pedagogy? Do we have I know part of the standard is there's a culturally responsive pedagogy related to some of this work. So is it, so I know this is gender specific, but in terms of the curriculum where we are expected to introduce culturally responsive pedagogy, is it just, are we looking at other diversity-related work as well on top of this?
We are, and actually Janice and the principals and I just recently had a meeting thinking about ways that we can have cycles where she's working directly with the teachers on the curriculum, even more so than she has been, because that's been very successful. People have been using her as a resource for many different things. So it's not just around this. This particular organization has been a key thought partner for us as we're trying to make sure that, I mean, really what the crux of this is that we're seeing people for who they are. We're honoring somebody's humanity, right? In our world, in our classroom, and that, to the point raised earlier, it's not about steering or suggesting. It's about, like, here's our world, and these are important things for us to be thinking about so that we can honor people and see them. And it is not just about gender. It's about, anything, in terms of race, ethnicity, religion, right? That all of this falls under that culturally responsible.
That's what I wanted to know. Okay, this standard umbrella. Okay, So I'm back to Doreen's. I'm sure we will see what we need to see, and then you can judge from there. My second question was more on a technical note that I was leaving for the board comment because it's totally not connected to the agenda, but I think I should just say it now. So this was parents' concern that was about an academic literacy. Well, I'm not sure, some kind of academic literacy approach that they want to know how to have a conversation about it. So it falls. I would equate it to what we are talking about because culturally responsive pedagogy is a requirement, right, in the schools, and we have to find a way to include that, and Centerlane falls under it, so that makes sense. And also teaching, be it math, English, I can't remember the specific thing, I don't want to say it, but let's say it's math or English or whatever, there is that literacy aspect that is connected to it that parents are seeing that there isn't some form of consistency, and they're trying to, they don't know, like they are trying to find, I've given them the steps of where to go, but I think 2 years ago is when that concern came, and somehow this is an elementary thing that they're seeking, that kind of support, and somehow it's not happening. They feel like, yeah, it's not going anywhere, but other things are moving forward, and they think it's just, so I just said I would just bring it. But I'm not sure the specifics, it will be redirected. I just don't want to be the mouthpiece because I don't like being a mouthpiece, but everybody hears me saying that I want to raise our marginalized voices. Anytime I sit down here, they're like, we're marginalized voice. I'm like, okay. But I don't know the specifics, but I'm hoping that you may know what I'm talking about, but it's not. I just want to bring it out here. So there you have it.
Let's vote on these.
Yeah, thank you for good conversation. Thank you. So is there a motion to approve business items 1 through 8?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Moving on to placement and services for CSE and CPSE. Are there any questions or comments? Is there a motion to approve our placement and services for CSE and CPSE?
So moved. Go ahead.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Personnel, it's a small one. We're going to look at this as a consent agenda. Are there any questions or comments about our appointments or our amendments? No? Is there a motion to approve our appointments and amendments?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Moving on to minutes. These would be from our September 27th meeting. Are there any questions or comments about our minutes?
No.
Is there a motion to approve our minutes from the September 27th meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. New business, just for our look at for the next meeting. This is the updated district code of conduct.
No, you're voting on it tonight.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
discussed, yeah.
Okay, I thought it was under new business. So this is what we discussed at our last meeting. So are there any questions or comments about the
Should be in
district
there as voting.
code of conduct?
I mean, I had a couple of questions, but I think, no, let me say this properly. It's great, and I'm going to vote for it, but I'm hoping that there'll be more discussion following that would allow a more elucidation of the information. I know the presentation was done early times, but I'm hoping that there's more that we can expand on this.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that Dr. McChrist has been, we've moved this forward in the calendar to allow the space for that,
For the improvement.
Yeah. For more
Did the
discussion.
policy committee look at this?
how we demand. That's.
Well, the policy committee hadn't come to formation yet, so we were, I mean, you can kick it back to policy if you want. That it's not going to be here for another couple months. And
I wasn't, sorry, yeah, so I missed it, I'm sorry.
yeah, it was, we haven't been able to get the policy committee rolling yet. This is, but it's full right for you as a board to address it directly, which is what we were recommending, that you had the opportunity for public comment. It's been up for public review as required since, I think, August. And a lot of reminders out about it, special memos, all the rest, several memos to you as a board about it, so it's been very, very visible.
Yeah, it's
So we felt that and the public, as best we can tell, is positive on where you are. And the two-stepper that we really want in May, June, come back to it then with even more revisions to it.
So let me be more direct. My question about it is that I'm hoping we could look at it and understand some phrase, because I don't want to assume some cognitive dissonance. You read the same thing, I'm reading the same thing, and it means it has different understanding to it, and also understand a more deeper framework. Exactly what Doreen said, I thought the policy committee would see it because it's something that is connected to policy, because code and conduct is under policy. I was thinking we would look at it first. But, so my direct question is, once this gets approved, when amendments are required, because we feel that this is more targeted than it should be, or whatever we think it is, and there is an agreement to it, what happens next? That, for me, is more of a technical thing than.
Well, I guess the question is, when would you be wanting to make the amendments? I mean, we've had this before the board now for going on 2 months. And the one step was it didn't go into the policy committee, and we didn't have the policy committee active and formed, so we thought, let's be very visible with the board directly with it. So if you're seeing at this point that there are things you would want to still consider revising, that's for you as a whole board to consider. If you want to have to go into the policy committee, that means you would probably not be voting on this till December, which you'll go through almost a half year without an approved code of conduct.
Yeah.
And that's where we had thought, let's lay it out with that 3-step process of because we had to add something. It says, I caught the fact that this stuff should get figured out in the spring for the following year. For some reason, it had been in the fall. So now we said, let's get this one resolved, redlined, adjustments made, that framework that is now existing in the schools for managing students is there. It's actually being quite well received. I indeed heard that today from the IWG in their focus groups, their forums. It's coming back with good positive views. Let's get this adopted with some amount of redlining that's in there. Then this guides us, and then May, June, we'll come back to it again, and that may be the time. But if you're thinking that there's amendments and changes you may want to consider, you as a whole board got to talk about that. And it may be the board feels fine with this, let's move it. You may say it's got to go into policy committee. I'd recommend you take this work, and then we'll look to revise, unless there's some particulars. I'm not clear.
Yeah, so the clarity here is that I had assumed, because we can't do work outside of work, like we are not allowed to discuss things outside of the public eye. So there was no way, whatever I was looking at that I could talk about it, right?
Well, it was on the agenda at the last meeting.
Yes, it was, but
Yep.
it wasn't.
I mean, it's been raised as in process all the way along, so
Correct.
it's been
I'm
quite
not-
explicit.
I'm not saying that the work hasn't been done by the school. I'm talking about we, the board, we are not allowed to do anything behind closed doors except when we meet. And so I have gone through it, but I have not discussed with my colleagues about it because I'm not supposed to. So I'm not saying that I'm not going to vote for it. What I'm saying is that opportunity for us to discuss it was not presented within the agenda. I couldn't just tear it up and say that, okay, now I have pen and paper to do this, right? So I have looked at it. I have some questions I want to ask about it.
Well, let me clarify. The last meeting within the public comment, it was in the agenda, and that was a possibility for public comment and then board discussion.
Correct.
That was the design. So obviously I was not here, but that was the opportunity for the board to
Well, it
do its.
wasn't expressed that way.
No,
I mean,
I hear what you're saying. but
Yeah.
The question is,
I mean,
would you be willing to pass it down knowing
I'm willing to pass
that
it,
we'll-
but what I'm saying, I'm asking a specific question, I'm willing to pass it, I'm not trying to stop it, but I'm saying that at some point, when will the policy committee be able to look at it in line with all the code of conduct changes we did to understand it better, than it being just another piece of paper. I'm just trying to,
Well, I think we've-
and I'm not saying it's not been there, I've looked at it.
No, I just want-
But that's why, if I hadn't looked at it, I'll say, I wouldn't be talking right now if I
Yeah,
hadn't.
I think to your point, this is a policy that's been revised the past 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. So I think we'll have another look at it, but also, because it reflects practices that are sort of ongoing at this moment, I think if we look at it in the spring, you'll have something to look back to quantitatively. How's it going? You'll be able to ask somebody what works, what doesn't work. I have a concern about this. So I think that, I definitely get the questions, but I think it
My
will be
explicit question
granted.
is that we are going to pass a notice about it. It will be a year. I'm saying that when will this come to the policy committee for us to look at it more closely? That's all I'm asking.
I think that's up to you as a board. I mean, the approach could be, if the board feels willing, and others may join you this, you may not be ready to adopt it tonight. That's your choice as a board.
I'm willing to
So
adopt it
what I'm
tonight.
saying is, you could adopt it tonight, and then when we get the policy committee up, we had the orientation session, now we have to get it scheduled and moving, that this could be a first order of business for the committee to look at it.
That's all I'm asking.
And depending on, and you as a board have full right to amend this in the flow of the year. So it could be that there's some amendments you want to make to this existing policy ahead of the May, June. You may say in discussion, we're good now, we can wait to May, June.
It's not an amendment as much as understanding certain things, that's all. Like, it's all.
Yeah, so I think a natural, but again, it has to be a board decision, there's a board vote, where you land. If you land on one option, which is adopt this, you then could say, we very much want to also have the policy committee pick it up to discuss, to at least have a clarification discussion. And then the policy committee should come back and say, we're not, a couple options. We ask that there be amendments voted on, and that's a 2-month process, right? Because you bring the first, and then it's a second. You'd have your existing policy governing what we're doing in this area, but you may make amendments to it later.
Yeah.
Or you say, we've had the discussion, reporting out to you from the committee, we see this document is fine, and also then, when we hit that May, June cycle, we would look at some.
Yeah, so I mean, I was just trying to understand the technicality, because I know all policies go to policy committee first. This is a policy that did not go to the policy committee, so that's all I was trying to figure out, how did that happen? And I'm just saying that we are going to vote on it, I am going to vote on it, but it did not come to the policy committee, so can it come afterwards? That's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to stop it, but I know a process, like, I work with process. I know all policies come to policy committee. If it's there, it should come to policy committee, so that, and it didn't happen. So can we visit it even when we vote on it, that's all?
Yeah, I think the policy committee can pick up a policy at any point it wants, so I think that.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
I see a couple of typos. Do you want me to just tell you later? About in the redlined version? Should I just email you what the problems are? Or am I supposed to just tell you in
Well, the
public?
revised version's the one we're voting on.
Is that the redline version? The redline version has some, just
So we could vote on it, and you could
No,
give
it's not,
corrections.
it's not the, my understanding, it's not the red line version. The red line is the draft
It's
for
the-
review, but the revised, the one up top is the
Yeah,
one.
the first
that's-
one, because
Right.
it incorporates the red lines revision.
so all of the mistakes are probably there, but just not redlined. If
It
it's
should
just
have
the
been,
same
the red
thing.
lined edits should have been incorporated into the one that doesn't have.
Some of the
red lines.
redline edits are mistakes.
So we can edit according to what I just said. So I think I'm thinking that, and Doreen, although you are not part this year in the policy committee, I think you can come in but not participate, so that it doesn't become a regular board meeting, because it will be full program.
How could I not participate, Damaris? I wouldn't know what to do. I'd have to
I guess the question is, maybe just to cut to the chase, are these typos or are these
Yeah,
substantive
let's go to, I'll say,
changes?
slide 19, for instance.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Page 19.
But the question is, are they typos or are they?
No, this is a couple of typos, and this is for instance, on page 19, there's a box it starts on page 18. It says, "The consequence," and then the school personnel authorized to impose consequence. Oral warning, for instance, on page 18, any member of the Hastings Hudson Union Free. Everything has a box filled in except for reflective restorative practice. On the other side, it doesn't say, in the box, it doesn't say who's allowed to do that. Like, that's empty. I feel like that should be,
So which page again are you on?
so it's the top of page 19.
Not vote on it.
There.
Let the policy committee go over it. What do you think?
Do you know what I mean, that box? Shouldn't it be filled with who can do that?
I will suggest we vote on it. I was not trying to not do it because then it
Well,
delays the use of it.
Well,
The board has to vote on it.
To use
One
it.
second. The board has to vote on it to use
Right.
it. And I have seen the document, and it's great. I'm not saying it's not great, but I just wanted to not have cognitive dissonance with certain things. So that being said, I will suggest we vote on it. However, we can work on it in the policy committee. If there are additional grammatical errors, editable spaces, all those things, we can do that.
I think that box is one of the most important things. We keep talking about it and it's not filled.
Correct. And then anything that we think we should, so I think we need to let the work continue without waiting, so we should vote on it. But again, I was making a technical clarification, that's all.
All right, fair enough. I agree. I think we should vote on it. I think, if we can pick it up again in policy, if there's any substantive corrections that need to go in there.
So who are we going to say can do the restorative
We
practice?
can
Anybody.
We can
Well, we can't
fix
do
it
that
now.
here, right?
Right.
Why don't we vote on it with the provision that also the policy committee is going to meet soon to
To
revisit?
fix that one box.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you. So we're going to vote, is there a motion to approve the 2023-24 District Code of Conduct?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
There. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Second public comment, there isn't anybody. Agenda review for next meeting is going to be 10/24. We have the senior tax exemption coming on, and then the audit report that was supposed to happen tonight is going to be moved to that meeting, right? Okay.
Could I just request on the senior, I think we said it last time, but do we have any more specific numbers? Because I think last time it was more of a range. Will we get that?
Yes.
Okay. And the same with the, I guess,
Firefighters.
on the firefighters, I guess the question on that was, did anyone look into whether the town would be willing to kind of talk to us about what might kind of, their contribution, if that would be possible? I don't know. Some of that came up last time around, but.
What was the first thing you said,
Curious.
Maureen?
The senior
Seniors
exemption is the
and the
first.
firefighters.
Yeah, so kind of they're separate days,
Yeah.
but just the research behind them.
Mhm.
The numbers for the senior exemption, because I don't think we were,
They weren't, when we
They
discussed it,
weren't
we didn't
clear
have
last time. We
numbers.
didn't have enough
Now,
time, I
there are
think, right?
numbers, yeah.
Right, I think that was the
That
issue
was
when
the
we did
holdup.
it last November, is that
Yeah.
there was like a pressure point of like, we must do it by the next meeting, and yet we don't know the actual numbers of people impacted by expanding the circle, people who would be eligible, and what the price would actually be. And I think because there was a chasm in that understanding, people were, in my estimation, rightfully, hesitant to make a decision which could have pretty severe repercussions. So I think having that, in very concretely laid out ways is going to make it easier for us to make a determination either way that we go in.
Yeah, I agree. Are there any Board of Education comments?
I'd like to say something. I'm just thinking about I'm thinking about the note, the memo that Dr. McCursey sent out to just express to the community that there are world events that are, upsetting, and we're taking it seriously, and, it's discussion is happening in the classes, and even just hearing you speak about it tonight, I just would so appreciate if, as a district, we are not just talking about Israeli lives lost, but also Arab lives lost, and not being afraid to say that, as I feel like our political figures are afraid to say. And I think that we live in a community where where there is enough, I don't know, heart opening and diversity of thought that we should talk about that. And I mean, I know my son came home and said in social studies, it's all we talked about. And I was so happy to hear that, everything was pushed aside and this world event was discussed. And I really want to make sure that we're not just valuing lives on one side, but on both.
My comments were going to follow exactly that I appreciated, Bill, what you sent and saying something tonight, but that it was so important that we don't just think about Israeli lives, but Palestinian lives, people in Gaza who are not part of Hamas, people in our own community, obviously many Jews, but there are Arabs, Muslims, there are people from Lebanon who knows what's going to happen in that part of the country. And I think it is important that we all keep that in mind. I mean,
Say it. I think we need to say it.
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying. I think Bill did say Middle East crisis, not just what was happening in Israel.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important to recognize that what happened in Israel was unprecedented in its brutality, and that it cannot be compared to almost anything else that has ever happened. And I think that that's really important for people to recognize, that when you hear about killing babies and babies' heads being chopped off and families being burned alive in their house, I mean, that is, you can't compare that to almost anything else. And I think it actually takes away, if you try to compare it to other deaths, you can't compare things when things like that happen. You can't say one is better or one is worse than the other. It's just bad, and I think it's worth it to take a moment and think about that horrific incident on its own.
I'm not talking about comparison. I'm talking about recognition of innocent lives lost
So
on both sides.
Yeah, I think I'll create a balance. So during, I will not diminish it, because I've been in your shoes where some things have happened to African Americans, lynching, burning alive in this country, and to date the aftermath is happening. And then when we want to talk about it, it's all of a sudden people want to compare. So I hear that passion, but I have lived, and I've done my own history knowing what happened to my own family lives with people that people think people that were brought here were captured who were royals, like, because they were stronger and had teeth and all those kind of. So sometimes it feels it may feel, and I've been there, very angry, and I feel insulted, because it's about Black lives, and then you are comparing it with other things. And yeah, I'm not saying that other lives are not important, but you're missing the point. But sometimes the way that it gets approached, and that's what I hear you saying, is that it looks as if although you want to say, let me just be blatant, although you are trying to say Black lives matter, the way that you approach it looks as if you are saying blue lives don't matter, right? So again, if we can think about the humanistic aspect, then that way, that emotional, so I mean, I agree with both of you, but that emotional piece sometimes is what drives some of us that would try to say we matter, and then somehow someone is not listening and thinking that therefore we are saying the other life doesn't matter, right? And so I think when things like this happen, because the parts of the brain that tags our emotions are part of it, sometimes it clogs our whole collective hearing. But so I'm agreeing with both of you. I just want you to know that I'm agreeing with both of you, and there are innocent Palestinian lives that have been impacted, and what has happened to Israel is painful, is
horrific, and innocent people have also been impacted. So adults stop already. Like, I think it will be useful for us to even do a 10-second silence for all lives that have been impacted. I mean, that would be my suggestion, if we can, a 10-second silence.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reacting also to people celebrating what Hamas did in the streets of Paris and New York City and London and around the world in supposedly civilized countries.
Got it. Yeah. So can I suggest we have a 10-second silence for all lives that have been...
May I just make a substantive comment? I mean, I think going forward, we do want to be explicit about the loss of innocent life everywhere through this situation. And I think there are phases to this. I think our roles as educators and our role is to keep us unified in the midst of all this difference, and to try and avoid where, as painful as it is for any of us personally, be us with Palestinians in our lives, Jews in our lives, Israelis, residents of the Gaza Strip, that there's innocent lives lost, and all of those innocent lives are not what we want. And so I think what we are going to be sharing is a resource to families, and Melissa's working on this. There's a mistake to rush stuff out. So even the letter from me was a day later than others, but we're trying to find the right balance. Rightly so, someone wrote in upset that Middle East was in the title as opposed to Israel, and I get the pain there. But we are going to come out with resources that speak to anti-Semitism and speak to anti-Islamic, and we're going to do both. And there'll be some who will be upset that we do that, but I'm hoping the larger will remember that what I wrote at the end of this letter, and that last paragraph was mine. A lot of it was informed by other people, many very thoughtful people, was about we have to stay unified here. We can't fall into the trap of fighting with each other here because the wrong words or wrong phrases are there, when at the core of what we're trying to do is be together. Because I have a resource I'm reading right now what the MIT president put out, and there is some useful language there that we may use going forward, and that's this idea of innocent lives lost, certainly in Israel, and most immediately, and also though now Palestinians, innocents, are losing life, and that's war. That's what goes on in war, and that's also what we're trying to say. But I think just as the board should know, we will have materials from us coming out as resources to family, so that in summary and very specifically deal with anti-Semitism and also deal with anti-Islamic behaviors. And I think it's really important we put that out. And again, we will have some people appreciative of that, and also people questioning that. Yeah. But I think as educators, again, we got to embrace and support the idea that we are in this together and have to support each other. So let me just, before, a moment of silence, I think, is a very compassionate move. I just wanted the board to hear, because you may react. You might say, well, Bill, let us coach you a bit on this.
Well, I think it's important, Bill. I think what you're saying, I think words matter. And I think after 9/11, it was really important to point out that the terrorists were Muslims, but not all Muslims are terrorists. Yeah. And I think it's, the Hamas they're Palestinians, but not all Palestinians are Hamas, and they also suffer being under the regime of Hamas. But Hamas are not militants. They're not freedom fighters. They're terrorists.
So I would just quickly say this, that because we are we are in an educational platform, we need to take that balance of us uniting, because a lot of, to be honest, the race-related work that I'm connected to, we avoid political statements that doesn't allow the unity of work. So none of you have ever heard me using the word Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter in anything, but I use this as an example because
there is a political piece to it that just connects the brain to it and takes away the humanity that we want to embody. And so I just threw that out so that we can maintain the unity that we need and not belittle at all an attack on the situation, but at the same time recognizing. I would like that, and again, I don't want to use this because it's fresh and I know how the brain can take freshness to be something else. That's why I'm using this to because it's dumbed down. The public spirit is dead, to be honest. So I'm using the Black Lives Matter and the Blue Lives Matter thing because we care. My dad was a military guy. Are you kidding me? I don't want killing that. And at the same time, I'm a person of color who understands the trauma, but the terms, the labels we use just takes away the meaning we want to bring forth. And so let's stay in unity like Dr. Makesi said. So thank you, Dr. Makesi. It was important you said that before the 10 seconds silence.
The resources that we'll be sharing, what I thought to do is a tiered resource sharing rather than having a whole big long
Good
list
idea.
and a one and done. I feel very strongly that the first tier should be around some teaching resources, and that will go to both families and teachers, so we're all on the same page. Social emotional learning resources for all ages, so talking to kids about violence, about crime, about war, about conflict, and how to support young people during these types of crises. And then differentiated elementary school, middle school, and some trauma-informed resources for entire systems. And this has been an effort regionally, amongst my colleagues and throughout other districts, and then we're each curating additional things that make sense for thought partners that we're working with within our districts as well. So there will be resources coming out with it's a tiered approach. So the next tier will be around anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, but right now it's like there is crisis.
Yeah.
We need to help children and ourselves process this.
So I think we could do 10 seconds of silence. There's two things I'd like to say, one related to this and one afterwards, unrelated altogether. But I do want to say that there are two different issues I think that we grapple with here. One is the loss of life, whomever. The other thing, and I think this is really what you were also getting at, Doreen, is the horrific, sadistic, like the part that's hard to even understand, the level of sadism that people could do to whoever they're doing it to. It's done here too. It's done to George Floyd, but it's like that there could be that level of sadism. And it's just, you can't even, I found it physically sickening when I really listened to it. I didn't want to watch, but, and I think that's the other thing that some people sort of grapple with about this particular.
Well, if everyone's comfortable, just a moment of silence just to acknowledge the gravity of the situation. Would that be all right before we close? Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Can I just add one thing?
Sure, of course.
And it does not compare in ways to this, but I don't want another 2 weeks to go by. I just want to make a comment following up on our last meeting where we had a facilities report and they started talking about the bond. And I just want to say, if there are people watching, thinking about our community, that I felt like it's important that people know that this is something that we're considering and starting to explore, but we have not made any decisions, and there will be many steps along the way before we get to where we end up getting. And that people need to know that we hear that in the community there are lots of questions, and those questions will all be honored and really listened to as we go along.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. Absolutely. Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you.